When society demands perfection, the most powerful bonds form in the shadows of authenticity. Subscribe to Romantasy Stories, where darkness finds its equal. Where are you watching from tonight as the rain falls? Would you reveal your true self to someone who could destroy everything you've built? An honest wolf in a pack of liars shines brighter than the moon itself, but draws the most dangerous attention. The steady patter of rain against the forest floor masked her movements as she worked. Each droplet striking leaves created a symphony of white noise that comforted Lyra as she knelt beside the massive carcass, her hands steady despite the chill of dawn. The rogue wolf had been terrorizing their territory for weeks, killing livestock, threatening pack members, until last night's hunt had finally ended his reign of terror. Now it fell to her to skin it before the Alpha and his enforcers arrived to examine their trophy. No proper Omega would be caught doing such work. Skinning was for betas, not for the delicate, submissive females meant to bear the next generation. But Lyra had never been proper. Her knife sliced cleanly through muscle and sinew, separating pelts from flesh with practiced precision. Blood mixed with rainwater beneath her knees, turning the earth to crimson mud that stained her worn jeans. She didn't care. The pack already called her impure behind her back. What was a little more dirt on her reputation? The rain intensified, drumming harder against the forest canopy. Droplets slid down her face like tears, though Lyra never cried anymore. She'd learned long ago that tears solved nothing in the world where your position in the hierarchy determined your worth. A twig snapped behind her. Lyra froze, knife still buried in the rogue's flank. She hadn't heard anyone approach. The rain had hidden their scent and footfalls too well. Slowly, she turned her head, expecting to see one of the beaters come to mock her for doing men's work again. Instead, she found herself staring directly into the gold-flacked eyes of Alpha Kieran himself. He stood motionless among the trees, rain cascading off his broad shoulders, soaking the simple black t-shirt that clung to his torso. His expression was unreadable as he watched her, a predator observing prey. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. In 6 years as part of the Blackwood pack, she'd never been this close to him. The Alpha rarely bothered with Omegas, especially ones like her who didn't fit the mold. Protocol demanded she bow her head in submission, bare her neck, show proper respect. She did none of these things. Instead, Lyra held his gaze and tightened her grip on her bloodied knife. If he was here to punish her for overstepping, for doing work beneath her station, he'd find she wouldn't cower like a proper Omega should. The rain fell between them, heavy and relentless now, thunder rolling in the distance as their stare held. Most Omegas would have run by now, or at least lowered their eyes. "You're not most Omegas," Lyra replied, surprised by her own boldness. Speaking to an Alpha without permission was enough to earn a formal reprimand. Challenging one could mean exile. A flash of lightning illuminated his features, the sharp angle of his jaw, the scar that cut through his right eyebrow, the intensity of his gaze. In that moment, she saw something unexpected flicker across his face. Not disgust, not anger. Respect. "No," he agreed, stepping closer. "You have skill with that blade. My father taught me, before..." She trailed off. Before he'd been killed challenging the previous Alpha, before her family had lost all status, before she, once destined to be a beta at minimum, had been reclassified as Omega after the loss. "You have your father's eyes," he observed, studying her face as rain continued to pour down around them. "Is that why you're here?" she asked, voice steady despite her racing heart. "To remind me of my place." A smile, quick and unexpected, flashed across his face. "If I wanted that, I wouldn't be alone." The implication was clear. The Alpha traveled with enforcers, with witnesses when delivering official pack business. This encounter was something else entirely. "Then why are you here?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Lightning flashed again, thunder following almost immediately. The storm was directly overhead now, rain pounding the forest floor, creating a curtain of water around them. "I saw you slip away from the celebration last night," he said. "Watched you track the rogue's body when everyone else was drinking to our victory." He gestured to her wandiwork. "Wanted to see what you were planning to do." She should have been terrified that the Alpha had been watching her, following her. Instead, a strange warmth unfurled in her chest. And now that you've seen... Kieran reached out, his hand hovering over hers where it gripped the knife, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Now I'm wondering what other secrets you're hiding, Lyra Kane. The way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold rain soaking through her clothes. He stood abruptly, water streaming from his hair down his face. Finish your work, then come to my cabin. We have matters to discuss. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the rain-soaked forest as silently as he had arrived. Lyra stared after him, knife still gripped in her trembling hand as rain continued to wash over her. In the distance, thunder rumbled, a warning of things to come. The rain had softened to a gentle patter by the time Lyra approached the Alpha's cabin. Located at the north edge of Pack territory, the structure stood apart from the main compound, a physical representation of the distance between Alpha and Pack. Rainwater dripped from the eaves, creating a rhythmic backdrop that failed to calm her frayed nerves. She'd finished skinning the rogue wolf, carefully preserved both pelt and useful parts, and returned to her small cabin to wash away the blood and grime. Now, dressed in the only clean clothes she owned, worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt, she hesitated at the foot of the wooden steps leading to Kieran's door. What did he want with her? In 6 years they'd exchanged maybe 10 words total, and now he was summoning her to his private residence. Omegas didn't get private audiences with the Alpha. That wasn't how things worked. Unless he planned to punish her away from prying eyes. The thought sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with her rain-dampened clothes. Before she could knock, the door swung open. "Were you planning to stand in the rain all night?" Kieran asked, his massive frame filling the doorway. He'd changed into dry clothes, dark jeans, and a gray Henley that stretched across his broad shoulders. "I was considering it," she replied honestly, cursing her lack of filter around him. That unexpected half-smile appeared again, there and gone in an instant. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. The cabin's interior surprised her. She'd expected opulence, a display of the Alpha's status. Instead, she found sparse, practical furnishings. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, flames crackling as rain tapped against the windows. Bookshelves lined another wall, hundreds of volumes organized with military precision. "You read," she observed, unable to hide her surprise. "Did you think Alphas were illiterate brutes?" There was amusement in his voice, rather than offense. "I thought Alphas were too busy maintaining their dominance to have time for books." The words slipped out before she could censor them. Instead of anger, he laughed, a rich, deep sound that seemed to vibrate through the cabin's wooden beams. "Sit," he said, gesturing to an armchair near the fire. "You're still cold." She hadn't realized she was shivering until he mentioned it. The chair was positioned to catch the fireplace's warmth, and she sank into it gratefully, extending her hands toward the flames. Kieran moved to a small kitchenette, returning moments later with 2 steaming mugs. He handed one to her before taking the seat opposite. "Drink. It will help." The mug contained some kind of herbal tea, the steam carrying notes of mint and something earthy she couldn't identify. She sipped cautiously, warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you," she murmured, surprise coloring her tone. Alphas didn't serve others. That wasn't the way of things. "You're wondering why I asked you here," he stated, watching her over the rim of his mug. "Among other things. Such as why the Alpha of the Blackwood Pack was watching me enough to notice I left the celebration, why you followed me this morning, why you're serving me tea instead of reminding me of my place." The rain intensified outside, droplets striking the windows in irregular patterns. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating Kieran's face in stark relief for a moment, revealing an expression he couldn't interpret. "Your place," he repeated, setting his mug down with deliberate care. "Tell me, Lyra, where exactly do you think your place is?" It was a trap. It had to be. No Alpha asked an Omega such questions without ulterior motives. "According to Pack law, my place is wherever is deemed useful to the Pack's continuation. As an unmated Omega, that means domestic duties, pup-rearing assistance, and eventually bearing children for a chosen mate." "That's what Pack law says," he agreed, leaning forward. I asked where you think your place is. The fire crackled in the silence between them as Lyra struggled with how to respond. The wrong answer could mean punishment, or worse, exile. But something in his steady gaze made her take the risk. My place is wherever I can be of actual use, she said finally, not scrubbing floors or watching other females' pups, when I could be hunting, tracking, or defending our territory. Like skinning a rogue wolf at dawn? Yes, even though it marks you as different, as improper. She met his gaze steadily. I'm already marked as different. I might as well be useful while I'm at it. The alpha studied her for a long moment, rain drumming against the roof in a soothing rhythm that belied the tension in the room. The pelt you harvested this morning, what were you planning to do with it? The question wasn't what she expected. Cure it properly, then use the hide to make winter gear for the pups. The pack has 5 new ones this season, and the winters are getting harsher. Kieran's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his eyes. Not keep it as a trophy, claim some credit for the kill? Lyra snorted before she could stop herself. What would be the point? No one would believe an Omega had anything to do with bringing down a rogue alpha. I would, he said quietly. The simple statement hung in the air between them. Outside, thunder rumbled, closer now, the storm circling back. Why am I here, Alpha? She asked again, setting her mug aside. He rose from his chair, moving to stand before the fireplace. Flames cast his shadow long across the wooden floor, reaching toward where she sat. The pack is facing challenges, he said, with his back to her. The rogue we killed last night wasn't a lone wolf. He was a scout. For whom? The Red Claw pack to the north. They've been expanding their territory, absorbing or eliminating smaller packs. 3 nights ago, they sent an envoy with terms. What terms? Submission or war. They outnumber us 3-1. The revelation should have terrified her. Instead, anger flared hot and bright in her chest. And you're considering submission. His eyes flashed bold, a glimpse of his wolf rising to the surface. I'm considering all options to keep my pack alive. Even if alive means enslaved. The words hung between them, dangerous in their directness. No one questioned an alpha's decisions. No one except her, apparently. Lightning flashed again, thunder following immediately. The storm was directly overhead once more, rain hammering against the cabin roof like 1,000 tiny fists. This morning, he said, voice low, I watched you skin a wolf twice your size without flinching. I saw your hands, steady, capable doing work that most in the pack would consider beneath them, work that needed doing regardless. He moved closer, and Lyra had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I've been watching you for longer than you realize, the way you hunt when you think no one is looking, how you strengthen the perimeter defenses during your supposed gathering excursions, how you've trained yourself to fight using fallen trees as practice dummies. Her breath caught. No one was supposed to know about that. She had been so careful. You're wondering how I know, he said, reading her expression. I'm Alpha. It's my job to know my pack. All of my pack, not just the ones who fit neatly into their assigned roles. What do you want from me? She asked, voice barely audible over the rain. The truth, he replied simply. No masks, no pretense, just whatever is real. Lyra stared at him bewildered. Why would you want that from me?
Because I'm tired of lies, he said, something raw entering his voice. Tired of performances and politics, and watching my pack slowly die from the inside while threats gather at our borders. He crouched before her chair, bringing them eye to eye. This close, she could see flecks of amber in his irises, could smell his scent, pine and smoke, and something uniquely him that made her wolf stir. I need someone who will speak truth when others offer only what they think I want to hear, he continued. Someone who sees what needs doing and does it, regardless of status or expectations. And you think that's me? An Omega who can't even be trusted to behave properly at pack gatherings? I think, he said carefully, that's exactly why it has to be you. The rain seemed to pause for a heartbeat, the whole world holding its breath as understanding dawned on her. "You want me to be your advisor?" she whispered, disbelieving. His smile was grim. "I want you to be much more than that, Lyra Kane, but we'll start there." Before she could ask what he meant, a howl pierced the night, urgent, warning. Another joined it, then another, until the air vibrated with their calls. Kieran was on his feet instantly, moving toward the door. "Stay here," he commanded, voice shifting to the alpha tone that compelled obedience. But Lyra was already standing, already moving to follow him. "What's happening?" He paused, hand on the doorknob, rain visible through the window behind him. "That's the northern perimeter alarm. Someone's breached our territory." Their eyes met, understanding passing between them. "Redclaw," she said. He nodded once. Redclaw. Then he was gone, door slamming behind him as he raced into the storm, leaving Lyra alone in the warmth of his cabin as rain lashed against the windows and the howls of her pack filled the night air. Lyra lasted exactly 43 seconds in the cabin before she made her decision. The Alpha had ordered her to stay put. The proper Omega response would be to obey without question, to wait demurely for his return, perhaps tidy his living space, or prepare food as a good Omega should. "To hell with that," she muttered, grabbing her jacket from where it had been drying by the fire. Outside, the storm had intensified. Rain fell in sheets, turning the forest path into mud that sucked at her boots as she ran. Lightning split the sky in jagged bursts, illuminating the woods in brief, ghostly flashes that cast bizarre shadows among the trees. The howls continued, more urgent now, coming from the northern ridge. She knew that area well, had reinforced the boundary markers there last week during one of her herb-gathering excursions. It was the most direct route from Redclaw territory, a steep incline that most would consider too treacherous to attempt in a storm like this, which made it the perfect entry point for an ambush. She cut through the underbrush, taking a shortcut she'd discovered years ago. The rain plastered her hair to her face, soaked through her jacket within minutes. Each breath came as a cloud of vapor in the cold night air as she pushed herself faster. The sound of snarls reached her first, the unmistakable noise of wolves fighting. Then came the scent, carried on the wind beneath the rain. Blood, adrenaline, and unfamiliar wolves, many of them. She slowed at the edge of a clearing, crouching behind a fallen log to assess the situation. What she saw made her blood run cold. At least a dozen Redclaw wolves, massive beasts with distinctive rust-colored markings across their shoulders, had engaged with the Blackwood Border Patrol, but this wasn't a full-scale attack. This was a targeted strike, and their target was clear: Kieran. The Alpha fought in human form, moving with lethal grace despite being surrounded. 3 Redclaw wolves had already lain motionless around him, but more kept coming. The Blackwood Patrol was being systematically separated from their leader, pushed back by superior numbers, while a coordinated group focused solely on isolating Kieran. This wasn't a territorial dispute, it was an assassination attempt. Lightning flashed again, thunder following instantly as Lyra analyzed her options. The patrol was outnumbered. Kieran, though holding his own, was fighting at a disadvantage, refusing to shift while his attackers remained in wolf form, using their enhanced strength and speed against him. She knew why he stayed human. The moment an Alpha shifted during conflict, it signaled all-out war. He was still trying to avoid that outcome, even as Redclaw clearly had no such reservations. Lyra's hand went to her belt, fingers closing around the hunting knife she'd cleaned after skinning the rogue wolf. Not much against a pack of wolves, but better than nothing. A cry of pain cut through the storm's noise. One of the Blackwood betas had gone down, crimson spreading across his chest where claws had found their mark. The patrol was losing, and Kieran was now completely cut off from support, backing toward the ridge edge where a 30-foot drop awaited him. She didn't think, didn't plan, simply acted. Lyra burst from cover, knife in hand directly toward the nearest red claw wolf. The element of surprise gave her the advantage for the crucial first seconds. Her blade found its mark, sinking deep into the wolf's shoulder before it could turn. The beast yelped, whirling with jaws snapping, but she was already moving, using the momentum to roll beneath its massive body and come up on the other side. Rain and mud covered her now, masking her scent as she slashed again, this time across the wolf's hindquarters. Not fatal blows, but enough to take one enemy out of the fight. "Lyra," Kieran's voice cut through the chaos, equal parts fury and concern. She had no time to respond. Another wolf lunged for her, teeth bared. She dropped and slid on the mud, making the ground treacherous enough to work in her favor. The wolf's jaws snapped shut on empty air as she slipped beneath it, knife flashing up to slice along its belly. Blood sprayed hot against her face, despite the cold rain. The wolf howled in pain, stumbling. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the scene in stark relief. Kieran fighting off 3 wolves simultaneously, the patrol struggling to regroup, and her, an Omega with nothing but a skinning knife, standing between the Alpha and certain death. One of the wolves attacking Kieran noticed her, breaking off to charge in her direction. This one was larger than the others, with a distinctive white patch across its muzzle. The lieutenant, she realized, Red Claw's second in command. She had seconds to make a decision. The knife wouldn't stop a wolf of that size. Shifting wasn't an option. Her wolf form was small, built for speed rather than combat. But doing nothing meant death, hers and likely Kieran's. The lieutenant wolf gathered itself to pounce, just as thunder boomed directly overhead. In that instant of distraction, Lyra did the one thing no one expected.
She ran, not away from the fight, but directly towards the edge of the ridge. The wolf followed, exactly as she'd hoped, powerful muscles propelling it after what it perceived as fleeing prey. Lyra counted the steps in her head, timing it precisely. 3 steps from the edge, she pivoted sharply, using the mud to slide sideways. The pursuing wolf, moving too fast to adjust course on the rain-slick ground, tried to mirror her movement. Its paws skidded in the mud, momentum carrying it forward as it scrambled for purchase. It found none. With a startled yelp, the lieutenant wolf went over the ridge edge, disappearing into the darkness below. Lyra had no time to celebrate. A searing pain exploded across her back as claws found her, tearing through jacket and shirt to the skin beneath. She cried out, dropping to her knees as warm blood mixed with cold rain on her skin. Through the haze of pain, she saw Kieran dispatch one of his attackers with brutal efficiency, snapping the wolf's neck with a single, powerful twist. His head turned at her cry, eyes widening as he saw her fallen, saw the massive red claw wolf standing over her with bloody claws raised for another strike. What happened next occurred so quickly that later Lyra would struggle to recall the sequence clearly. Kieran roared, not a human sound, but not fully wolf either. Something primal, ancient, that made the very air vibrate. His body blurred, clothes shredding as he shifted faster than she'd ever seen anyone transform. Where a man had stood heartbeats before, a massive black wolf now stood, larger than any wolf she'd ever seen, with eyes that burned gold even through the rain and darkness. The Alpha had shifted. War was now inevitable. Kieran Wolf crossed the clearing in 3 bounds, slamming into her attacker with such force that both wolves went rolling across the muddy ground in a tangle of teeth and claws. The sounds they made weren't like normal wolves, deeper, more visceral, the kind of noise that triggered primal fear in the brainstem. Lyra pushed herself up, ignoring the fire across her back. Blood soaked what remained of her shirt, but the rain washed it away almost as quickly as it appeared. Around them, the tide of battle had turned. The remaining Blackwood patrol, seeing their Alpha shift, had done the same. Now equally matched in form, they drove the Red Claw wolves back. Several of the invaders, seeing their lieutenant gone and the battle turning, retreated into the forest. Others fought on,
perhaps realizing there would be no mercy now that blood had been spilled and their assassination attempt revealed. Kieran and his opponent, likely a high-ranking Red Claw enforcer, remained locked in combat, a whirlwind of black fur and russet, of snapping jaws and slashing claws. Despite her injury, Kieran couldn't look away. He fought with a lethal grace that made it clear he'd been holding back before, unwilling to cross the line into open warfare. That restraint was gone now. With a move too fast for human eyes to track, Kieran caught the other wolf's throat between his jaws. There was a moment of stillness as their eyes locked, predator to predator, before his powerful jaw muscles flexed. The sound was wet, final. The Red Claw wolf convulsed once, then went limp. Silence fell across the clearing, broken only by the continued patter of rain and the occasional rumble of distant thunder as the storm began to move on. The remaining Red Claw wolves had fled or been killed. The Blackwood Patrol gathered, some shifting back to human form to tend to their wounded, others maintaining wolf shape to secure the perimeter. Kieran released his opponent's lifeless body, massive wolf form stalking to where Lyra knelt in the mud. His golden eyes were unreadable as he approached, muzzle and chest dark with blood that the rain couldn't quite wash away. She should have been afraid. Any sane person would fear an alpha wolf fresh from a kill, blood rage still evident in every line of his powerful body. Instead, she found herself reaching out as he came close, fingers hovering inches from his mud-spattered fur. The great wolf lowered his head, pressing against her open palm. The contact sent a jolt through her, warmth and something else, something that made her wolf stir beneath her skin in response. For a moment, they remained like that, the wounded Omega kneeling in mud and blood, hand buried in the fur of an alpha wolf who had just killed to protect her. Then, the moment broke as one of the betas approached. "Alpha," he called, maintaining a respectful distance. "The invaders had been repelled, but we should get the wounded back to the compound." Kieran pulled away from her touch, padding several feet away before shifting back to human form in a fluid motion that spoke of years of practice and control. Unlike the violent, explosive shift into wolf form, this transformation was smooth, almost elegant. He stood naked in the rain, seemingly unconcerned with his state as he issued orders to the patrol. Lyra averted her eyes, though not before noting the claw marks across his chest and shoulder, wounds he'd received while fighting to protect the pack, to protect her. "You disobeyed a direct order," he said quietly when he returned to her side, someone having brought him a pair of jeans to pull on. She looked up at him, rain mingling with blood on her face. "I did. You could have been killed. So could you." His jaw tightened. "That's different." "Is it?" She tried to stand, that pain lanced through her back, making her gasp. Kieran caught her before she could fall, strong arms supporting her weight effortlessly. "Your back needs treatment," he said, voice softening. "The wounds are deep." "I've had worse." It wasn't a lie. Life as an outcast Omega had taught her to endure pain in silence. Something flashed in his eyes, anger, but not directed at her. "Not anymore, you haven't." Before she could respond, he swept her into his arms, cradling her against his chest. "I'm taking you back to my cabin. The pack doctor will meet us there." Her protests died as exhaustion and blood loss caught up with her. She let her head rest against his shoulder, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat audible even through the diminishing rainfall. As Kieran carried her through the forest, she caught fragments of conversation from the patrolmen. "The Omega fought like a... never seen anything like it. The Alpha protected her." But it was the last whispered exchange that sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the rain or her injuries. Red Claw will be back. And next time, they'll bring their entire pack. The Alpha's cabin smelled of antiseptic, herbs, and blood, Lyra's blood, soaking through the towels beneath her as she lay on her stomach across Kieran's bed. The pack doctor, an elderly beta named Marta, worked in silence, cleaning the deep claw marks that ran from her right shoulder to her left hip. Rain continued to patter against the windows, gentler now as the storm moved away, leaving behind the soothing rhythm that had always calmed her wolf. She needed that calm now, as Marta's needle pierced her skin again and again, suturing the worst of the gashes. "You're lucky," the doctor muttered, not sounding as though she believed in luck at all. "Another inch deeper and these would have severed your spine." Lyra didn't respond. Her focus was on Kieran, who stood by the window, staring out at the darkness. He'd barely spoken since bringing her here, his expression unreadable as he'd summoned Marta and ordered the rest of the pack to secure the compound. "Almost done," Marta said, cutting the final suture thread. "The wounds should heal cleanly, though you'll have scars." "More scars won't matter," Lyra replied, voice muffled against the pillow. "I'm not exactly winning beauty contests as it is." Marta made a disapproving noise in her throat. "Self-pity doesn't suit you, girl." She began applying a pungent salve to the closed wounds. "You saved lives tonight, including the Alphas." "I endangered the pack," said Kieran from the window, still not turning, "by holding back, by trying to avoid war when Redclaw had already decided it was inevitable." "You tried to protect your people," Marta countered with the familiar ease of someone who had known the Alpha since childhood. "There's no shame in that." "Tell that to the dead." The doctor finished bandaging Lyra's back, then gathered her supplies. "She needs rest. The wounds will heal faster if she shifts, but not for at least 24 hours. The sutures need time to set." "Understood," Kieran replied, finally turning from the window. "Thank you, Marta." The older woman nodded, then surprised Lyra by briefly resting a weathered hand against her cheek. "Rest well, brave one," she murmured, before gathering her medical bag and leaving them alone. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft patter of rain. Lyra struggled to sit up, managing to prop herself against the headbed. Sheet clutched to her chest. Her ruined shirt and jacket lay discarded on the floor, leaving her in just her jeans. "You should lie down," Kieran said, finally breaking the silence. "Marta said you need rest. And you need to talk about what happened, about what happens next." A humorless smile touched his lips. "Always direct, even flat on your back with wounds that would have killed most wolves." "I'm not most wolves," she reminded him, echoing her words from their earlier encounter. "No, you're not." His expression softened fractionally. He moved to sit on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle her. Up close, she could see that his own wounds had already begun to heal, the benefits of alpha blood. The claw marks across his chest were now angry red lines rather than open gashes. "Redclaw will return," he confirmed, what he'd overheard. "Tonight was a probe, testing our defenses, our resolve, and my willingness to shift." "They wanted to force your hand," Lyra realized, "to make war inevitable." "They succeeded. The moment I shifted, I committed the pack to conflict." "They were going to kill you," she argued. "What choice did you have?" "I could have died without shifting, left my second-in-command to negotiate terms that might have spared the rest of the pack." Anger flared hot in her chest. "You can't believe that." "It was an option, one I discarded the moment I saw you bleeding in the mud." His voice had dropped to nearly a whisper. "Why did you come, Lyra? Why risk yourself when I ordered you to stay here?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications she wasn't ready to examine. "Because it was the right thing to do," she said finally. "Because I couldn't just wait here while you and the others fought. Even though you're an Omega, not built for combat according to pack tradition." There was something in his tone she couldn't identify, a challenge perhaps, or a test. "I've never much cared for tradition, especially traditions that exist only to keep people in their assigned boxes." Rain tapped against the windows in the silence that followed, a gentle counterpoint to the tension in the room. "Earlier," Kieran said carefully, "before the attack, I started to tell you what I wanted from you." Lyra's heartbeat quickened. "You said you wanted me as your advisor. And much more, you said." "Yes, I want you as my Luna." The word hung in the air between them. Luna, the Alpha's mate, second in command of the pack, a position typically held by the strongest, most socially adept female, never an outcast Omega with a reputation for impropriety. "That's not funny," she managed, certain he must be mocking her. "Do I look like I'm laughing?" His expression was deadly serious. "Why would you—" She stopped, regrouped. "You can't be serious. The pack would never accept me as Luna." "The pack will accept who I choose," he stated with the simple certainty of an alpha who had never been challenged. And tonight, you proved yourself more worthy of the position than any wolf in Blackwood. By disobeying a direct order, she couldn't help asking. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. By seeing what needed to be done and doing it, regardless of status or expectations. By speaking truth when others offer only what they think I want to hear. He echoed his words from earlier that evening, before the world had tilted on its axis. Lyra stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. She found none, only an intensity that made her wolf stir unrestily beneath her skin. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. "I know enough." He reached out, hesitating a moment before his fingers gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch lingered, warm against her cheek. "That you're right. There's much I don't know. That's why this isn't a claiming. Not yet. It's an offer, one you're free to accept or refuse." The implications stunned her. An alpha asking, not taking, offering choice where tradition dictated there should be none. "Why me?" she whispered, needing to understand. "There are dozens of females better suited, ones who haven't spent years being called impure behind their backs." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Who calls you that?" She looked away. "Everyone. It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," his voice had dropped, edged with a growl that raised the hair on her arms. "Why do they call you impure, Lyra?" The question she'd been dreading, the truth she'd hidden for 6 years, ever since her family's fall for grace. She could lie, make up something about her improper behavior, her refusal to act like a proper Omega. But he'd asked for truth, for whatever was real. Rain drummed harder against the windows for a moment, as if encouraging her confession. "Because I am," she said finally, voice barely audible. "Impure. Tainted." Kieran's expression remained neutral, waiting.
Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Your wolf, it's smaller than most, and you can't maintain the shift as long as pure-blooded wolves." She nodded, shame burning her cheeks. "Half-breeds aren't supposed to exist. We're abominations, according to pack law. My father protected me as long as he could, but after he died, my father reclassified you as Omega," Kieran finished. "The lowest rank to minimize your influence." "Yes." "And the pack has treated you as tainted ever since." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes." Silence fell between them, filled only by the gentle patter of rain. Lyra waited for his disgust, his withdrawal of the offer. No alpha could take a half-human as Luna. It would weaken the bloodline, undermine his authority, make him a laughingstock among other packs. Instead, Kieran did the last thing she expected. He smiled. He said, "Good," the words so incongruous with her confession that she wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. "Good?" she repeated, bewildered. "Good," he confirmed, reaching out to cup her face between his hands. "I don't need pure, Lyra. I don't need perfect. What this pack needs, what I need, is real." Before she could respond, he continued, voice low and intense. "Do you know what I see when I look at you? Not impurity, strength, the resilience to survive in a world designed to break you, the courage to remain true to yourself when every force pushed you to conform." His thumbs brushed gently across her cheekbones. "Your human blood doesn't make you less. If anything, it makes you more adaptable, more compassionate, more willing to question traditions that no longer serve us." Lyra couldn't breathe, couldn't think. No one had ever spoken to her like this, as though her greatest shame was actually something to be valued. "Red Claw is coming," Kieran continued, his voice gaining urgency. "War is inevitable now. I need someone beside me who sees clearly, who isn't blinded by outdated traditions or prejudices. Someone who understands both worlds, wolf and human, and can help build something new from the ashes of what's to come." Lightning flashed in the distance, a final reminder of the storm that was passing, and of the greater storm approaching. "I need you, Lyra Kane, not despite what you are, but because of it." The truth of his words resonated in her bones. in the place where her wolf resided. For the first time in 6 years, she felt something unfamiliar unfurl in her chest. Hope. "I'm not pure," she whispered, needing to say it one more time, needing to be certain he understood what he was asking. Kieran's response was to lean forward, his forehead touching hers, his scent, pine and smoke, and something uniquely him, enveloping her. "Good," he repeated softly, his breath warm against her lips. "I don't need perfect, I need real." And as the rain continued its gentle cadence against the windows, Lyra made her choice. The morning dawned clear after the storm, sunlight filtering through windows still dotted with raindrops. Lyra woke slowly, disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings, the softness of the bed beneath her, the scent of pine and cedar in the sheets, the quiet absence of the usual morning noises from the communal areas of the Pack compound. Memory returned in fragments, the attack, her injuries, Kieran's unexpected offer. She'd fallen asleep mid-conversation, exhaustion and blood loss finally claiming her. Now, as she carefully pushed herself up, wincing at the pull of stitches across her back, she found herself alone in the Alpha's bedroom. A neatly folded pile of clothes sat at the foot of the bed, not her own, but they looked to be her size. A note rested on top, in strong, angular handwriting. "Council meeting at noon. These should fit. Rest until then. K." Rest was the last thing on Lyra's mind. Gingerly, she worked her way into the clothes, soft grey leggings, and an oversized button-down shirt that would be gentle against her injured back. Both items carried a faint trace of Kieran's scent, though they were clearly new. The cabin was empty when she ventured out of the bedroom. Through the windows, she could see increased activity around the Pack compound, guards patrolling in pairs, beaters moving with purpose between buildings, an atmosphere of focused preparation. Preparing for war. The guilt hit her suddenly, unexpectedly. If she hadn't intervened last night, perhaps Kieran wouldn't have shifted. Perhaps there would still be hope for a diplomatic solution, however slim. Her actions, well-intentioned as they were, had helped push them over the edge into inevitable conflict. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Before she could respond, the door opened to reveal Marta, the Pack doctor, medical bag in hand. "I thought you might be awake," the older woman said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Sit, I need to check those wounds." Lyra complied, settling onto a chair with her back to her. The doctor worked efficiently, removing bandages to examine the sutured gashes. "Healing nicely," she pronounced. "Your mixed blood has some advantages. Humans heal slower, but their bodies are better at fighting infection." Lyra stiffened. "How did you—" "Girl, I was this Pack's doctor when you were born. Of course I knew your mother was human. I delivered you myself." "You never said anything." "Wasn't my secret to tell." Mataha's hands were gentle despite her brisk tone. "Besides, what difference would it make? Those who needed to know knew. Those who didn't, well, prejudice finds targets with or without facts." She finished rebandaging Lyra's back, then moved around to face her. "The Alpha tells me you'll be attending the council meeting." It wasn't quite a question, but Lyra nodded anyway. "As what, precisely?" Marta's sharp eyes missed nothing. "I'm not sure," Lyra admitted. The conversation with Kieran had ended ambiguously. She knew what he'd offered, but not what she'd agreed to, if anything. Marta packed away her supplies. She paused, hand on the knob. "A storm is coming, Lyra. Not like the one last night. Bigger, deadlier. The Pack will need every strong wolf it has, pure-blooded or not." Then she was gone, leaving Lyra with more questions than answers. The Pack Council chamber occupied the central building of the Pack compound, a circular room with a large round table at its centre. As Kieran's personal guard escorted her through the main doors, she felt the weight of every stare following her movements. 5 council members were already seated, Kieran's most trusted advisors, all high-ranking betas or former alphas who had willingly submitted to his leadership. Among them was Thorn, his second-in-command, a battle-scarred wolf who had served Kieran's father before him. None looked pleased to see her. Kieran stood at the head of the table, commanding attention without effort. His eyes found hers immediately, something warming in his gaze before his expression returned to the neutral mask of leadership. "Lyra," he acknowledged with a slight nod, "join us." The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as she approached the table. There were no empty seats, and yet Kieran gestured to the chair at his right hand, the place traditionally reserved for the Luna. Thorn's jaw clenched visibly. "Alpha," he began, voice carefully controlled. "Perhaps the Omega should wait outside until her testimony is required." "The Omega," Kieran replied, an edge entering his tone, "has earned a place at this table. Her actions last night saved lives, possibly including mine." "With all due respect," another councillor interjected, Elias, one of the oldest members, "this is unprecedented. Council matters are for ranked pack members only." "Then consider her rank changed," Kieran stated flatly. A stunned silence fell over the room. Lyra froze halfway to the chair, suddenly the focus of every shocked stare. "You can't be serious," Thorn said, disbelief evident. "She's an Omega, a half-breed." "Choose your next words with extreme care," Kieran warned, a dangerous stillness coming over him. "You speak of one who may soon be your Luna." The declaration landed like a physical blow. Elias actually recoiled in his seat. Another councillor, Helena, the only female among them, let out an audible gasp. "This is madness," Thorn growled, rising from his seat. "You would pollute the bloodline, weaken the pack when we face our greatest threat in decades?" "I haven't accepted any position," Lyra stated clearly, drawing all eyes back to her, "and I won't be used as a distraction from the real issue at hand, the imminent attack from Red Claw." Kieran's expression shifted, quickly masked by something that might have been approval. "Well said." He gestured again to the empty chair. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." She took the seat, ignoring the continued stares of the council members. Thorn remained standing, tension radiating from every line of his body. "Alpha," he said formally, "I must officially register my objection to this arrangement." "Noted," Kieran replied calmly. "Now sit down. We have a war to plan." For a moment it seemed Thorn might refuse. Then, with visible effort, he lowered himself back into his chair. "Now," Kieran continued, "let's begin with what we know. Red Claw's attempted assassination last night marks the beginning of open hostilities. Their failed attack will only accelerate their timeline for a full-scale invasion." "How many fighters can they field?" Helena asked, pragmatically shifting focus to strategy. "At last count, approximately 120 wolves of fighting age," Kieran replied. "We have 43. The numbers hung heavy in the air, nearly 3-to-1 odds, as Kieran had mentioned to Lyra the night before. "They'll attack from the north," Thorn stated, grudgingly re-engaging. "Same access point they used last night. It's the most direct route from their territory." Lyra frowned, studying the territory maps spread across the table. "No," she said, the word escaping before she could consider the wisdom of contradicting Kieran's second-in-command. "Explain," Kieran prompted, ignoring the renewed tension. "Last night was a probing attack. They've shown their hand with that approach. They won't use it again for their main assault." "And you're suddenly a military strategist?" Thorn asked, sarcasm heavy in his voice. Lyra met his gaze steadily. "I've spent more time patrolling our borders than anyone in this room. While you've been attending council meetings, I've been learning every path, every weakness in our perimeter." "She's right," Kieran interceded before Thorn could respond. "Red Claw won't repeat last night's approach. Where, then?" he asked Lyra directly. She leaned forward, indicating a section of the western border. "Here, the river crossing. It's shallower now than it's been in years due to the drought. The current isn't strong enough to deter a determined wolf, and the approach is sheltered by dense forest almost to the water's edge." "That crossing is 3 miles from the compound," Helena observed. "Why would they choose a longer route?" "Because we're not watching it," she replied simply. 2 guards patrol that section once a day, always at dusk. The rest of the time it's unmonitored."
A heavy silence fell as the implications sunk in. "How do you know our patrol schedules?" Elias asked, suspicion clear in his tone. "Because I've been supplementing them, unofficial perimeter checks, several times a week for the past 4 years." "Without authorization?" Thorne demanded, outrage coloring his voice. "Without recognition," Kieran corrected quietly. "There's a difference." The look he gave Lyra held something she couldn't quite identify. Regret, perhaps, or a deeper understanding. It occurred to her that while he claimed to have been watching her, there was much about her daily life he might not know. "If Lyra's assessment is correct," Kieran continued, "we need to redistribute our defensive forces immediately. Thorne, I want double patrols on the western border, focused on that river crossing." "Yes, Alpha," Thorne replied stiffly. "Helena, coordinate with the families. Any non-combatants should be moved to the emergency shelters beneath the meeting hall." "When do we expect the attack?" Elias asked, his earlier hostility towards Lyra temporarily set aside in favor of practical concerns. "Tonight," Lyra said at the exact moment Kieran answered, "within 24 hours." Their eyes met across the table, shared certainty passing between them. "They'll want to move while they believe we're still disorganized from last night's skirmish, before we can fully prepare." "We should evacuate the vulnerable," Helena suggested. "The very young, the elderly, those who cannot fight." "No," Lyra said firmly, again drawing surprised looks. "That's exactly what they'd expect. A mass movement would be easily detected, and evacuees would be vulnerable on the road. Red Claw would simply split their forces to attack both groups." "So we just keep our weakest members in the direct path of danger?" Elias demanded. "We hide them in plain sight," she countered. "The old mining tunnels beneath the East Ridge, they run for miles with multiple exit points outside our territory. They're not on any maps shared with other packs."
"How do you even know about those?" Thorne asked, suspicion returning. "They were sealed decades ago." "My father showed me," she replied, memories of exploring the dark passages with him surfacing unexpectedly. "After my mother died, he said we might need them someday if the pack ever turned against us for what I am." The admission created another uncomfortable silence, broken finally by Kieran. "The tunnels are a good option," he decided. "Helena, work with Lyra to coordinate the relocation. It must be done discreetly, in small groups, starting immediately." "Yes, Alpha," Helena agreed, with a speculative glance at Lyra that held more curiosity than hostility now. "What of the human town to the south?" another councillor asked. "If this escalates, humans could be caught in the crossfire." "We warned them," Kieran stated. "Not the full truth, but enough. A wildlife danger advisory. Displaced predators from the northern forests. It should keep them out of the woods for a few days." "And if Red Claw breaches the compound?" Thorne asked, the question everyone had been avoiding. Kieran's expression hardened. "Then we make them regret it. Every building, every clearing, every path becomes a potential trap. We know this territory better than they do. We use that advantage." The council meeting continued for another hour, tactical discussions blending with logistics as they prepared for what was coming. Throughout, Lyra found herself consulted repeatedly, her knowledge of the territory proving invaluable as they plotted defensive positions. By the time Kieran adjourned the meeting, the sun had begun its descent toward the western horizon. Council members departed swiftly, each with assignments to complete before nightfall. Only Thorne lingered, his gaze moving between Kieran and Lyra with barely disguised concern. "A word in private, Alpha," he requested formally. Kieran nodded. "Wait for me outside," he told her. "We need to discuss the tunnel relocations." She left them to their conversation, though she could guess its content. Objections to her involvement, warnings about diluting the bloodline, traditional concerns from a traditional wolf. Outside, the compound bustled with activity, the news of imminent conflict having spread. Wolves moved with purpose, carrying supplies, checking weapons, reinforcing buildings. No one seemed to notice Lyra as she stood in the shadow of the council hall, or if they did,
The usual whispers and sidelong glances were absent, everyone too focused on preparation to bother with pack politics. She didn't have to wait long before the council hall door opened again. Thorn emerged first, his expression thunderous as he stalked past her without acknowledgement. Kieran followed more slowly, his face unreadable as he approached. "That went about as well as expected," she observed dryly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Thorn is traditional. He'll adapt." "Or he'll challenge you," she countered. "I'm not worth dividing the pack over, Kieran, especially not now." His expression softened at her use of his name rather than his title. "You underestimate your worth and overestimate the pack's resistance. I've spent 6 years as an outcast. I know exactly how they feel about me." "Do you?" He gestured toward the compound, where preparations continued. "Look again. What do you see?" She followed his gaze, not understanding his point. "People preparing for battle. People following a plan that you helped create," he corrected gently. "Your knowledge, your insights, already working to protect the pack. Actions speak louder than bloodlines, Lyra." Before she could respond, Helena approached, tablet in hand. "The first groups are ready for relocation to the tunnels. We could use guidance on the access points." Kieran nodded. "Lyra will show you. I need to coordinate the defense teams with Thorn." "Now?" Lyra asked, surprised by the sudden separation. "Now," he confirmed. "There's no time to waste." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "Be careful. Stay alert. Redclaw may have scouts watching us already." The concern in his voice was genuine, warming something deep inside her, despite the dire circumstances. "I will." He nodded once more, then turned away, moving toward where Thorn waited with a group of fighters. She watched him go, struck by the casual authority in his bearing, the way others naturally deferred to him without conscious thought. "He's different with you," Helena observed, breaking into her thoughts. "What do you mean?" "Softer. More human." Her choice of words seemed deliberate. "It's not a criticism. Our alpha has carried too much alone for too long." Before Lyra could formulate a response, Helena continued. "The first evacuation group is ready for tunnels. We could use guidance on the access points." The subtle vote of confidence wasn't lost on Lyra. "Lead the way. I know these tunnels like the back of my hand." As they walked toward the gathering point, Lyra couldn't help pouncing back once more. Kieran stood amidst his fighters, issuing commands, the mantle of leadership firmly in place. For a brief moment, as if sensing her gaze, he looked up, their eyes meeting across the distance. Even from afar, his message was clear. "Be safe. Come back to me." She would try, but as the sun continued its descent toward the horizon, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that before the next dawn, everything would change. For her, for Kieran, for the entire Blackwood pack. War was coming, and with it, a reckoning that had been 6 years in the making. Dusk settled over the forest like a shroud, long shadows stretching across the compound as Lyra emerged from the hidden tunnel entrance for the 3rd time. The evacuation was proceeding smoothly, nearly half the pack's vulnerable members now safely hidden in the labyrinthine passages beneath the eastern ridge. Her back throbbed dully, the wounds protesting the repeated trips through the low, narrow tunnels. She'd refused to let it slow her down, leading each group personally, ensuring they were settled in the larger chambers deeper within the mountain before returning for the next. "That's the last of the pups," Helena reported, checking names off her tablet, as mothers hurried their young ones into the concealed entrance, a narrow fissure in the rock face, disguised by dense underbrush. Only the elders and injured remain. Lyra nodded, scanning the darkening forest. The sense of being watched had grown stronger with each trip, though she had detected no scent or sound to confirm her suspicion. "We should hurry. Night falls soon." As if summoned by her words, a long, mournful howl rose from the distant northern boundary. Another answered from the west, then another from the south. The sound raised the hair on her arms, her wolf stirring uneasily beneath her skin.
Redclaw scouts, Helena whispered, her face paling. They've surrounded the territory. Go, Lyra urged, gently pushing the last mother and pup toward the tunnel entrance. Get everyone as deep as possible. There are supplies cached in the main chamber, enough for several days. Helena hesitated. What about you? I need to warn Kirin. Lyra was already moving, her decision made without conscious thought. Seal the entrance behind you. Don't open it for anyone but me or the Alpha. She didn't wait for Helena's acknowledgement, racing back toward the compound as twilight deepened around her. The forest had gone unnaturally quiet, even the birds silenced by the predators that now stalked its shadows. The evacuation had taken longer than expected. Full darkness would fall within the hour, and with it, she suspected, the Redclaw attack. The timing made sense. Wolves saw better at night than humans, and the Redclaw pack would want every advantage. The main compound came into view, now transformed into a fortified position. Barriers had been erected at strategic points, fighters positioned on rooftops and behind reinforced walls. Lyra spotted Thorn directing a group of beaters near the northern approach, his expression grim as he distributed weapons, both traditional and modern. Silver-edged blades for close combat, a few rifles loaded with tranquilizer darts for longer range. Kirin stood at the center of the compound, surrounded by his senior fighters. He looked up as she approached, relief briefly crossing his features before his expression returned to the controlled mask of leadership. Evacuation status, he asked without preamble. Nearly complete. All pups and most elders are secure in the tunnels. Helena is overseeing the final group. He nodded. Redclaw scouts have been spotted at all boundaries. They're more organized than we anticipated. How long do we have? Minutes, not hours. He drew her aside, away from the others. You should join the evacuation. Get to safety while there's still time. The suggestion kindled immediate resistance in her chest. I'm staying. Lyra, I can fight. I proved that last night. His expression softened for a brief moment. You did, but your injuries are healing, and you need every wolf you have. Around them, the final preparations continued. Fighters checking weapons, reinforcing barriers, moving into defensive positions. The atmosphere was tense but focused, each member of the pack doing what needed to be done without hesitation. What struck Lyra most was the absence of the usual hierarchy. Alphas worked alongside beaters, beaters alongside lower-ranking wolves. In the face of external threat, internal divisions had temporarily dissolved, a unified pack rather than a stratified society. Kirin studied her face, seeming to read her determination. Stay close to me, he finally conceded. I can better protect you there. Or I can protect you, she countered, a ghost of a smile touching her lips, despite the circumstances. Something flickered in his eyes, warmth, even in the midst of impending battle. A commotion at the northern perimeter interrupted them. Thorn approached rapidly, tension evident in every line of his body. Alpha, he reported, voice clipped. Redclaw envoy approaching under white flag, requests parley. Kirin's expression hardened. How many? 3. They're Alpha and 2 lieutenants, unarmed as far as we can tell. Lyra frowned. It's a distraction. They're buying time to position their forces. Likely, Kirin agreed, but we can't refuse without appearing weak or fearful. It could be an assassination attempt, like last night, but more direct. They wouldn't dare, Kirin replied, though his tone lacked conviction. Not under flag of truce. Even Redclaw observes some traditions. Lyra wasn't so sure, but she kept her doubts to herself as Kirin issued orders for the envoy to be escorted to the central clearing. Fighters positioned themselves strategically, visible enough to serve as warning, concealed enough to respond to any treachery. Stay behind me, Kirin told her as they moved to the clearing, but watch closely. I value your eyes. The implied trust warmed her, even as anxiety knotted in her stomach.
She took her position slightly behind Kieran's right shoulder, with Thorn flanking his left. Other high-ranking wolves formed a loose semicircle behind them, a show of strength and unity. The red-clawed delegation entered the clearing from the north, 3 figures moving with the fluid grace of born predators. At their center walked a man Lyra recognized immediately from pack intelligence briefings. Vane Blackthorn, Alpha of Redclaw, tall, powerfully built, with steel-grey hair and cold eyes that assessed everything with calculating precision. Flanking him were 2 younger wolves, 1 male and 1 female, both bearing the distinctive russet marking across their shoulders that gave the Redclaw pack its name. Siblings, Lyra guessed from their similar features. The male's gaze swept the clearing, assessing threats, while the female's eyes fixed immediately on Kieran with an intensity that raised Lyra's hackles. The 2 alphas stopped several feet apart, measuring each other with the wary respect of apex predators sharing temporary space. Vane Blackthorn, or ignore the bait and states your purpose. The flag of truce buys you minutes, not hours. Straightforward then. Vane clasped his hands behind his back, stance deceptively relaxed. I'm here to offer terms one last time. Surrender your territory, pledge your pack to Redclaw, and blood need not be spilled this night. And if I refuse? Then we take what we want anyway, over the bodies of your fighters. Your pups become our pups. Your females become our females. And you, Vane's cold gaze shifted briefly to Lyra, then back to Kieran, become a cautionary tale other alphas tell their successors. The threat hung in the air, deadly in its simplicity. Lyra fought to keep her expression neutral, though her wolf raged beneath her skin, wanting to tear the smug confidence from Vane's face. You assume victory, Kieran observed calmly, a dangerous presumption. I assume reality, Vane countered. My pack outnumbers yours 3 to 1. My wolves are battle-tested, having absorbed 4 territories in the past 2 years. And, his smile widened fractionally, I have information suggesting your pack is compromised from within. The implication sent a chill through Lyra. A traitor? Someone feeding information to Redclaw?
Kieran's expression remained impassive. If you're finished threatening my pack on our own land, you can take my answer back to your fighters. Blackwood belongs to us. It will remain ours when the sun rises tomorrow.
So be it. Vane's gaze hardened. Blood it is. He turned as if to leave, then paused, looking back over his shoulder. One last courtesy, alpha to alpha. If you send your females and pups into the old mining tunnels beneath the East Ridge, you might want to recall them. The support structures are less stable than they once were. Horror froze Lyra in place as the meaning became clear. Redclaw knew about the tunnels, knew they were being used for evacuation, and had already taken action. Kieran's composure slipped for an instant, rage flashing in his eyes before he controlled it. If you've harmed our young... Oh, the charges haven't been detonated, Vane interrupted smoothly. Yet. That depends entirely on how the next few hours unfold. The female lieutenant stepped forward, speaking for the first time. Perhaps a more personal arrangement could be reached, Alpha Grey. Her eyes travelled over Kieran with inappropriate familiarity. Mate bonds between rival alphas have settled conflicts before. Sarah, Vane admonished, though his tone held more amusement than censure. Always so direct. He turned back to Kieran. My daughter offers a valid alternative. A union between our bloodlines could avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Lyra bit back a growl, the possessiveness of the reaction surprising her. Kieran's hand moved slightly at his side, a subtle gesture for her to remain calm. I've chosen my Luna, he stated flatly, and she stands with Blackwood. Sarah's gaze shifted to Lyra for the first time, dismissive at first, then sharpening with sudden interest. The half-breed, she asked, disbelief colouring her tone. Your standards have fallen indeed, Kieran Grey. My standards have risen, he corrected. I value strength of character over purity of bloodline, something Redclaw might learn from. Vane's expression darkened. You would pollute your line with human blood, and expect other packs to recognize such a match. I expect nothing from those who value antiquated traditions over actual worth, Kieran replied evenly. Now take your offer of enslavement and your insults and leave our territory while the truce still holds. For a moment, tension crackled in the air between them, two alphas on the edge of violence despite the white flag. Then Vane inclined his head slightly, not submission, but acknowledgement of the temporary stalemate. You have 1 hour to reconsider. After that, we come with fire and fang. The Red Claw delegation retreated, disappearing into the gathering darkness at the clearing's edge. As soon as they were out of sight, Kieran turned to his lieutenants. The tunnels are compromised, he stated urgently. Thorn, take 4 of our fastest runners, find the charges and disarm them if possible. And if we can't, Thorn asked urgently, then evacuate everyone, bring them back to the compound. They'll be walking into a slaughter, Lyra protested, unable to remain silent. Better a fighting chance than buried alive, Kieran countered grimly. Go, Thorn, now. As Thorn and his selected runners departed, Kieran turned to the remaining fighters. Red Claw will attack within the hour, regardless of their stated deadline. They wanted us distracted by the tunnel threat. Double the perimeter guards, focus on the western approach. The fighters dispersed to their assignments, leaving Lyra alone with Kieran in the clearing. His composure remained intact, but she could sense the rage simmering beneath, not just at Red Claw's threats, but at himself for not anticipating the tunnel vulnerability. It's not your fault, she said quietly. None of us considered they might know about the tunnels. I should have, he replied tightly. I'm Alpha. It's my job to protect the pack. You can't anticipate everything, she insisted, and we still have time to evacuate the tunnels before... She stopped abruptly, a realization striking her with sudden clarity. Vane knew too much about the tunnels, about the evacuation, information he couldn't have gathered just from perimeter scouts. Kieran's eyes met hers, understanding dawning. A traitor. Someone high-ranking, she continued, the pieces falling into place. Someone with access to council discussions and evacuation plans. Someone who was watching when you revealed the tunnel locations this afternoon, he finished, expression darkening. The question is, who? The implications were staggering. Someone they trusted, someone in Kieran's inner circle had betrayed them to Red Claw. But why? And who? Before they could pursue the thought further, a distant explosion rocked the night, the sound rolling over the compound like thunder. Lyra's heart stopped as dust rose from the direction of the east ridge. The tunnels, she whispered in horror. Kieran was already moving, shifting as he ran, clothes shredding as his massive black wolf form emerged. Lyra followed, ignoring the pain that tore across her back as her shift began, a slower, more painful transformation due to her mixed blood. Where a woman had been heartbeats before, a smaller wolf now ran, silver-grey with unusual golden eyes. She pushed herself to keep pace with Kieran's longer strides as they raced towards the explosion site, praying they weren't too late. The eastern ridge came into view, a plume of dust and debris still rising from where the hidden entrance had been. Horror struck as Lyra realized the truth. Red Claw hadn't waited for their deadline. They detonated the charges immediately after leaving the parley. A trap all along. Kieran reached the collapse first, massive paws digging frantically at the fallen rock. Lyra joined him, scraping at smaller debris, searching desperately for any sign of survivors. The sense of blood and fear permeated the air, muffled by dust and stone. A weak sound from under the rubble froze both of them, a whimper, barely audible. Kieran renewed his efforts, powerful muscles bunching as he dislodged a large boulder. Lyra squeezed into the small opening he created, her smaller form allowing her to navigate spaces he couldn't. The tunnel had partially collapsed, but not completely. A pocket of space remained where the main support beams had held, though for how long was uncertain. In that space, huddled together in terror, were several pack members, mostly elders and a few mothers with pups. Among them, bloodied but alive, was Helena. Relief washed over Lyra, followed immediately by renewed urgency. She shifted back to human form, ignoring her nakedness as she called back through the opening. They're alive, at least 15 of them in a stable pocket. Kieran's answering growl held relief and determination. He shifted as well, his voice carrying through the gap. "Can they move? Is there another way out?"
Lyra turned to Helena, who was pressing a makeshift bandage to a gash on her forehead. "The main tunnel is blocked further in," the councilwoman reported weakly. "We were heading back out when the charges went off." "The secondary exit," Lyra said urgently. "Through the old ventilation shaft. Is it clear?" Helena shook her head. "We don't know. No one's tried it yet. It's our only chance." Lyra turned back to the opening. "Kieran, I'm going to lead them through the ventilation shaft. It comes out near the Western Creek, about half a mile from here." "Too dangerous." His voice came back immediately. "Red Claw could be waiting." "More dangerous than being crushed if the rest of the tunnel collapses?" she countered. "We have no choice." A moment of silence. Then, "Be careful. I'll meet you at the exit point with reinforcements." "We'll be there," she promised, though uncertainty gnawed at her. The ventilation shaft was narrow, rarely used, and might itself have been damaged in the explosion. But it was their only hope. She turned back to the survivors, forcing confidence into her voice. "Follow me. Single file, help those who need it, and stay quiet. Sound carries in these tunnels." As she led them deeper into the mountain, away from the collapsed entrance, a cold certainty settled in Lyra's chest. Red Claw's strategy was now clear. Divide Blackwood's forces, separate the fighters from those they protected, then attack when they were at their most vulnerable and distracted. And it was working perfectly. The battle for Blackwood had begun, not with a frontal assault, but with treachery and calculated cruelty. As she guided her frightened charges through the dark, cramped passages, Lyra could only hope that Kieran had recognized the trap in time to prepare for what would surely come next. Because somewhere above them, in the night-shrouded forest, Red Claw was moving in for the kill. The ventilation shaft narrowed as it ascended, forcing Lyra to crawl the final 100 feet on hands and knees. Behind her, the line of survivors stretched back into darkness, 15 souls depending on her to lead them to safety. The irony wasn't lost on her. The outcast Omega, now responsible for the pack's most vulnerable members. Cool night air brushed her face as she neared the exit, carrying the scents of the forest, pine, loam, water from the nearby creek, and something else. Something that made her freeze in place, one hand raised to halt those behind her. Wolves. Unfamiliar ones. Red Claw. She inched forward with extreme caution, peering through the tangle of roots and vegetation that partially concealed the shaft opening. The Western Creek lay just beyond, silvered by moonlight, and patrolling its banks were 4 Red Claw fighters, moving with the alertness of hunters expecting prey. They had anticipated this escape route. Somehow, they knew. She retreated slightly, turning to the nearest survivor, an elder named Marok, whose clouded eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made the pack's historian for decades. Red Claw at the exit, 4 fighters patrolling. Marok's weathered face tightened. Trap. Yes, they knew we'd come this way. The implications hung between them, reinforcing what she and Kieran had already suspected. Someone in Blackwood was feeding information to Red Claw, someone who knew about both tunnel entrances. "The children?" Marok asked, gesturing to the 3 pups huddled with their mothers further down the line. "We need a distraction," Lyra decided, "something to draw the patrol away from the exit long enough for everyone to get clear." "I can shift," one of the younger mothers offered. "Lead them away from here." "Too risky," Lyra shook her head. "You're needed to protect your pup." Her mind raced, evaluating options. "I'll do it. I'm fastest in wolf form, even injured. I can lead them on a chase, then double back to meet you." "Where?" Helena asked from further down the line. "We can't return to the compound if Red Claw's between us and it." "The old trapper's cabin," Lyra replied, after a moment's consideration. 2 miles south. It's isolated, defensible, and not on any pack maps. Kieran will find us there." "Assuming he's still alive," a dark voice whispered in her mind. She pushed the thought away. Kieran was Alpha. He would survive. "I'll create the distraction," she continued. "Once the patrol is clear, move quickly but quietly.
Stay in the creek bed for the first quarter mile to mask your scents, then head southwest. Marok knows the way." The old wolf nodded. "Used to hunt there as a young man. I remember." "Good," Lyra said. Stripped off the remains of her borrowed shirt, the only clothing that had survived her earlier shift, and prepared herself mentally. "Wait for my signal. When you hear a wolf's cry from the east, that means the patrol is following me. Go immediately." Before anyone could object further, she began her shift. The transformation was never easy for her. Not the smooth, fluid change that pure-blooded wolves experienced, but a grinding, painful reconstruction of bone and muscle. Her mixed heritage exacted its price with every shift. The silver-grey wolf emerged from the painful change, smaller than most, but with keen senses and quick reflexes. The wounds on her back had reopened, fur matted with fresh blood, but she pushed the pain aside. Lives depended on her focus now. She slipped from the tunnel exit, belly low to the ground, using the vegetation for cover as she circled away from the creek. The patrol hadn't noticed her yet, still watching the exit with predatory patience. She needed to draw them far enough away that the escape party would have time to clear the area. Selecting a position nearly 100 yards east of the tunnel, Lyra took a deep breath, then loosed a deliberate howl, not the mournful sound of communication, but the sharp, challenging cry of a wolf marking territory. The effect was immediate. All 4 Red Claw fighters turned toward the sound, instantly alert. They conferred briefly, then 2 began moving in her direction, while the others maintained position near the creek. Not good enough. She needed all 4 to follow her. Lyra howled again, this time adding a taunting yip at the end, the wolf equivalent of a direct challenge. Then she broke cover, making sure they caught a clear glimpse of her silver fur before darting into the underbrush. "There, Blackwood wolf," one of the patrol shouted. "It's just one, female, small. The others must be nearby." "Follow her," a third voice commanded. "She'll lead us to them." Perfect. All 4 were now moving in her direction, leaving the tunnel exit clear. Lyra kept herself just visible enough to maintain their interest, leading them on a winding chase through the forest, away from both the tunnel and the direction her packmates would take to the trapper's cabin. The pursuit grew closer as her wounded back began to slow her. Red Claw wolves were built for power more than speed, but her injury was giving them the advantage. She needed to lose them soon. The terrain sloped upward as she approached a rocky outcropping. A plan formed in her mind. Risky, but with potential. She scrambled up the rocks, making sure her pursuers saw her ascend, then disappeared over the top. Instead of continuing across, she immediately doubled back, finding a narrow crevice between boulders to squeeze into. Her smaller size, often considered a disadvantage, now became an asset as she wedged herself into a space the larger wolves couldn't follow. From her hiding place, she watched as all 4 Red Claw fighters reached the outcropping, milling about in confusion as they lost her trail. "Spread out," their leader ordered. "She can't have gone far." They divided, 2 continuing over the outcropping, while 2 began searching the immediate area. Lyra remained perfectly still, controlling her breathing despite the fire across her back. Blood trickled down her flank, but the rocky ground would mask the scent. Minutes passed like hours as the search continued around her hiding place. One wolf came so close she could have touched his leg, yet he moved on without detecting her. Eventually, the 2 searchers gave up, following their companions over the outcropping. Lyra waited until their scents had faded before squeezing back out of the crevice. Her wounds protested the rough treatment, but she had no time for pain. She needed to reach the trapper's cabin to ensure the others had made it safely. She took a circuitous route, doubling back several times to ensure she wasn't followed. The forest had come alive with activity, distant howls and occasional human shouts suggesting the main battle had begun. She could only hope that Kieran had received enough warning to prepare. The old trapper's cabin appeared through the trees, a small, dilapidated structure nearly reclaimed by the forest. No rights showed, but that was to be expected. The refugees wouldn't risk giving away their position. Lyra approached cautiously, scenting the air for any sign of Redclaw. Finding none, she shifted back into human form, the pain even more intense this time as her depleted body struggled with the transformation. Naked and shivering, she limped to the cabin door and tapped a pattern, 3 quick, 2 slow, the old Blackwood signal for friend approaching. The door cracked open, Helena's face appearing in the narrow gap. Relief washed over her features as she recognized Lyra, pulling the door wider to admit her. Inside, the refugees had organized themselves effectively. The 3 pups slept in the far corner, exhausted by the ordeal. The adults had created makeshift weapons from the cabin's meager contents, a rusted axe, fire pokers, sharpened sticks. "You made it," Helena whispered, helping Lyra to a chair. "We were worried." "Redclaw followed me for a while, but I lost them," Lyra replied, accepting a tattered blanket to wrap around her naked form. "Any sign of Kieran or reinforcements?" Helena shook her head. "Nothing. But we've heard fighting from the direction of the compound. It sounds intense." Lyra's heart clenched. Kieran had promised to meet them at the tunnel exit with reinforcements. His absence could mean many things, none of them good. "Your back is bleeding again," Marok observed, approaching with a damp cloth. "Let me help." She submitted to his ministrations, wincing as he cleaned the reopened wounds. "I need to go back," she said, the decision crystallizing even as pain clouded her thoughts. "You're in no condition to fight," Helena objected. "You can barely stand." "I'm not going to fight," Lyra clarified. "I'm going to scout. We need information, how the battle is progressing, whether it's safe to move you to another location." "And if you find the Alpha?" Marok asked, his clouded eyes somehow seeing more than they should. "Then I help him, however I can," she answered simply. The old wolf nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "You care for him, beyond pack obligation." It wasn't a question, but Lyra found herself answering anyway. "Yes." "Good," Marok said. "He has been alone too long. Leadership without companionship hollows a wolf from within." Helena approached, holding out a bundle of clothing. "These belong to my son. They'll be too large, but better than nothing." Lyra accepted the offering gratefully, loose pants and a flannel shirt that indeed swam on her smaller frame, but they were clean and would protect her from the chill night air. "I'll return by dawn," she promised, moving toward the door. "Barricade this entrance after I leave. Don't open it for anyone but me, or Kieran." "Be careful," Helena urged. "Redclaw will be hunting for survivors." With a nod of acknowledgement, Lyra slipped back into the night. The forest had grown quieter, the sounds of battle more distant now. Either the fighting had moved elsewhere, or, worst possibility, it had ended. She maintained human form as she moved, lacking the strength for another shift so soon. The borrowed clothes would help mask her scent from casual detection, though any wolf actively tracking would still find her. Keeping to the densest cover, she made her way toward the compound. The journey was slow, each step a careful calculation of risk versus need. Twice she froze as Redclaw patrols passed nearby, holding her breath until they moved on. As she neared the compound's edge, the extent of the devastation became clear. Buildings smoldered, some of them still actively burning. Bodies lay scattered across the once peaceful grounds, Redclaw and Blackwood alike, the divisions of pack meaningless in death. She crouched behind a fallen tree, scanning the scene for any sign of Kieran or other Blackwood survivors. Movement caught her eye. A group of Redclaw fighters herding captured Blackwood wolves towards the council hall. The prisoners moved with the defeated posture of those who had surrendered rather than die, some supporting wounded companions. Thorn walked among them, apparently uninjured but with his hands bound before him. The sight sent conflicting emotions through Lyra. The Alpha's second had never accepted her, had openly opposed her elevation, yet seeing him captured felt like a personal loss. Of Kieran, there was no sign. A new figure emerged from the council hall, Vane Blackthorn, Alpha of Redclaw. He surveyed the captives with cold satisfaction, saying something Lyra couldn't hear from her position. Whatever it was caused Thorn's head to snap up, rage momentarily overcoming his defeated posture. She needed to get closer, to hear what was happening. Moving carefully around the perimeter, she approached from the shadow of the armory.
one of the few buildings still largely intact. From this new position, voices carried more clearly on the night air. "Still no sign of him," one of the Red Claw lieutenants was reporting to Vane. "Search parties are combing the North Woods." "He won't have gone far," Vane replied dismissively, "not with his pack captive and his precious half-breed missing." Lyra's breath caught. Kieran was alive, still free, still fighting.
"You're a fool if you think Kieran Grey will surrender, even for his pack," Thorn spat, earning a backhanded blow from the nearest guard. "Oh, I don't expect surrender," Vane smiled thinly. "I expect him to attack, driven by the same misplaced sense of honor that made his father challenge mine." He turned to address the gathered captives. "Your alpha abandoned you to save himself, but I am merciful. Pledge yourselves to Red Claw, and you will live. Refuse, and join the dead already fertilizing your lands." Fury rose in Lyra's throat, nearly overwhelming her caution. How dare he suggest Kieran had abandoned the pack? But even through her anger, she recognized the tactical genius of Vane's approach, sowing doubt among the captives, weakening their resolve, offering a path of least resistance. "You lie," a new voice rang out. Helena's daughter, Maya, one of the younger fighters. "Our alpha would never abandon us." Vane's cold gaze fixed on her. "No? Then where is he? Why doesn't he show himself?" "Because he's smarter than you think," Maya shot back. "He's planning how to take back what's ours." The Red Claw Alpha's expression hardened. Brave words from one so young. He nodded to a nearby enforcer. "Make an example of her." Horror froze Lyra in place as two Red Claw fighters dragged Maya forward. The young wolf fought, but weakened by previous combat, she was no match for their strength. They forced her to her knees before Vane, who drew a wicked-looking knife from his belt. "Last chance to pledge yourself to Red Claw," he told her, voice almost gentle. Maya lifted her chin, defiance in every line of her body. "I am Blackwood. I will always be Blackwood." "So be it." Vane raised the knife. What happened next occurred too quickly for Lyra to fully process. A black blur exploded from the shadows of the meeting hall roof, dropping directly onto Vane with devastating force. The Red Claw Alpha went down beneath the impact, knife flying from his hand. Kieran, in wolf form, massive and terrible, jaws closing on Vane's shoulder even as they hit the ground. Chaos erupted as Red Claw fighters rushed to their Alpha's defense. Kieran released Vane, only to tear into the nearest attacker, blood spraying across the compound ground. More shadows detached from surrounding buildings, Blackwood fighters, who had evaded capture, launching a coordinated attack from multiple directions simultaneously. Lyra found herself moving without conscious decision, racing toward where Maya still knelt, vulnerable in the midst of sudden violence. She reached the young wolf just as a Red Claw enforcer turned in their direction, recognizing an easy target. With strength born of desperation, Lyra shoved Maya toward the relative shelter of the council hall steps. "Run!" she commanded, turning to face the approaching threat. The Red Claw wolf was massive, nearly twice her size in human form. He grinned, recognizing her despite the borrowed clothes. "The half-breed. Our alpha wants you alive. Something about leverage." "Your alpha has bigger problems right now," Lyra replied, backing away slowly, drawing him from Maya's escape route. Around them, the battle raged, snarls and screams filling the night as Blackwood fought to reclaim their home. From the corner of her eye, she saw Thorn somehow free of his bonds, fighting back-to-back with another Blackwood beta. Her momentary distraction cost her as the Red Claw enforcer lunged. She dodged, but not quickly enough, his weight catching her shoulder and spinning her to the ground. Pain exploded across her back as she landed on her partially healed wounds. The enforcer loomed over her, shifting smoothly to wolf form, a massive russet beast with hatred in its yellow eyes. Lyra tried to roll away, but her body betrayed her, strength fading as blood soaked through her borrowed shirt. The wolf's jaws opened, descending toward her throat. In that moment, she thought not of her own death, but of Kieran, of the connection they'd begun to forge, of the future that might have been. A silver flash intercepted the descending jaws, a blade piercing the wolf's throat with such force that the tip emerged from the back of its neck. The enforcer made a wet, gurgling sound, then collapsed beside Lyra, dead before he hit the ground. Thorns stood over them, bloodied but unbowed, a silver dagger clutched in his hand. "Get up," he ordered gruffly, extending his free hand. "This isn't over yet." Stunned by the unexpected rescue, Lyra accepted his help, letting him pull her to her feet. "Why?" she managed, the question encompassing so much more than the immediate intervention. Thorn's expression was unreadable. "You're one of us," he said simply, "and we protect our own." He pressed the dagger into her hand. "Now fight like it." With that, he was gone, diving back into the battle that swirled across the compound. Lyra gripped the dagger, new strength flowing from Thorn's unexpected acceptance. She scanned the chaos, searching for Kieran. She found him at the center of the compound, still in wolf form, circling Vane, who had also shifted, a massive grey wolf with battle scars crisscrossing his muzzle. The two alphas faced each other in the ancient way, pack members from both sides forming an instinctive ring around them. The challenge was clear, alpha against alpha, with leadership of both packs as the prize. Such confrontations were rare in modern times, but the primal law still held. The stronger wolf would lead, the weaker would submit or die. Lyra pushed her way to the front of the watching circle, heart in her throat as she witnessed the deadly dance unfolding before her. Kieran was younger, faster, but Vane had experience and cunning on his side. Both were already wounded, Vane from Kieran's initial attack, Kieran from earlier fighting. They clashed in a blur of black and grey, teeth finding flesh, claws raking deep. The sounds they made were not those of normal wolves, deeper, more primal, the ancient language of dominant males fighting for supremacy. They separated, circling again, blood darkening their fur. Kieran favoured his left side now, where Vane's teeth had torn a gash along his ribs. The older alpha moved with confidence of one who sensed weakness, who had seen victory within reach. "Finish him, father!" The cry came from Sarah, the Red Claw Alpha's daughter, watching from the opposite side of the circle. The encouragement seemed to energize Vane, who launched another attack, driving Kieran backward with the sheer force of his charge. The black wolf gave ground, nearly stumbling as his injured side slowed his response. The grey wolf tore into the opening, tearing deeper into the already wounded flesh. Kieran yelped, a sound of pain that cut through Lyra like a physical blow. He pulled free, leaving fur and blood in Vane's jaws, but the damage was done. He limped now, strength visibly fading as he faced his opponent. The watching wolves sensed the shift in momentum. Red Claw members began to edge forward, anticipating their alpha's victory. Blackwood fighters watched in growing despair as their leader weakened before their eyes. Vane attacked again, and this time Kieran went down, rolling onto his back as the larger wolf's weight bore him to the ground. In wolf hierarchy, such a position meant submission or death. Vane's jaws went for Kieran's exposed throat, the killing bite that would end the challenge and claim Blackwood for Red Claw. Something broke inside Lyra, a dam holding back everything she had suppressed for 6 years. Rage, fear, and something deeper, something primal that transcended human thought or wolf instinct. Without conscious decision, she found herself moving, pushing through the ring of watchers, silver dagger clutched in her hand. "No!" The cry tore from her throat as she placed herself between the fallen black wolf and his attacker. Vane pulled short, startled by the human interruption of what should have been a sacred combat between alphas. His yellow eyes burned with fury at the interference, a growl rumbling from his massive chest. "Stand aside, half-breed," Sarah called from the sidelines. "This is between alphas." "He is my alpha," Lyra stated, voice carrying clearly despite her terror. "My pack, my mate." The last word emerged without forethought, a truth she hadn't acknowledged even to herself until this moment. Behind her, she felt Kieran stirring, struggling to regain his footing. She kept her eyes fixed on Vane, dagger held before her in a grip that wouldn't intimidate a full-grown wolf, but might buy precious seconds. "You would die for him?" Vane asked, the words somehow clear despite coming from wolf jaws, an alpha's ability to project meaning beyond normal communication. "I would kill for him," she corrected, the dagger steady in her hand, "starting with you." A ripple moved through the watching wolves, shock, disbelief, perhaps even grudging respect. No one had expected the half-breed Omega to stand against an Alpha, to place herself in death's path for her pack. Vane's muzzle wrinkled in what might have been amusement. Brave. Foolish, but brave. He tensed, preparing to lunge past her to reach the still vulnerable Kieran. In that instant, Lyra made her choice. She couldn't defeat an alpha wolf in direct combat, but she didn't need to. She only needed to create an opening. As Vane sprang forward, she didn't try to dodge. Instead, she turned her body, accepting the impact while driving the silver dagger deep into his shoulder. Not a killing blow, but a crippling one that would hamper his strongest attacking side. The grey wolf's momentum carried them both to the ground, his greater weight crushing the air from her lungs as pain exploded across her back. His jaws snapped inches from her face, rage replacing calculated violence as the silver dagger burned in his flesh. Then his weight was gone, torn away by a black blur that had somehow found renewed strength. Kieran, back on his feet, had caught Vane mid-recovery and now drove him across the compound with ferocious intensity. The watching circle broke and reformed as the Alphas crashed through its boundary, neither giving quarter now. Lyra pushed herself up, gasping for breath, the world spinning around her from impact and blood loss. Strong hands caught her before she could fall, Helena supporting her weight, as they watched the battle's final moments unfold. Vane fought with the desperation of one who sensed defeat approaching, his movements hampered by the silver dagger still protruding from his shoulder. Kieran pressed the advantage, driving the older Alpha back step by step toward the council hall steps. In a move too quick to track, Kieran feinted left, then reversed, catching Vane's hind leg between powerful jaws. Bones snapped audibly as Kieran wrenched sideways, using his opponent's momentum against him. The grey wolf went down hard, unable to regain his footing with both right limbs now compromised. Kieran stood over him, teeth bared, golden eyes blazing with the dominance that had made him alpha. The moment of decision had arrived. By pack law, Kieran could, perhaps should, end Vane's life, eliminating the threat permanently. The watching wolves held their collective breath, Redclaw and Blackwood alike, as destiny balanced on the edge of sharpened teeth. Kieran's jaws opened wide, descending toward Vane's exposed throat, the killing bite that would end the challenge and claim Blackwood for Redclaw. At the last instant they swerved, closing instead around the scruff of the grey wolf's neck, the hold of dominance rather than death. He shook the older alpha once, hard enough to demonstrate complete control, then released him. The message was clear: submit or die. For a long moment Vane remained motionless, pride warring with survival instinct. Then, slowly, he turned his head, exposing his throat fully to Kieran's jaws, the ultimate gesture of submission among wolves. A sound moved through the watching pack members, a collective release of tension as the challenge ended in the most traditional way. Kieran had won, not just through superior strength, but through the mercy that separated a true leader from a mere tyrant. The black wolf stepped back, allowing Vane to struggle to 3 functional limbs, head lowered in defeat. Around them, Redclaw fighters watched in stunned silence as their alpha, previously undefeated in challenges, acknowledged submission to another. Kieran shifted then, the transformation fluid despite his injuries. He stood naked before the assembled wolves, blood streaking his body from multiple wounds, yet somehow more impressive for the damage he had survived. Redclaw is now part of Blackwood, he announced, voice carrying across the suddenly silent compound. Those who accept this may stay. Those who cannot will leave our territory by dawn, never to return. Vane shifted as well, the process more laborious for the older wolf. His human form bore the marks of battle, the puncture from Lyra's dagger in his shoulder still seeping blood, his right leg bent at an unnatural angle. I have submitted, he acknowledged, voice rough with pain and humiliation. Redclaw is yours. His eyes moved to his daughter and son, standing rigidly among their packmates. My children are skilled. They would serve you well as lieutenants if you permit. The request, ensuring his offspring's position despite his own defeat, showed a father's concern beneath the alpha's ambition. Kieran considered for a moment, then nodded once. If they pledge loyalty to Blackwood, they may prove their worth. Lyra watched in a daze as Blackwood members began moving among the former enemies, helping wounded from both sides. The tribal lines that had seemed so absolute minutes ago were already blurring, the pragmatic nature of wolves recognizing the new order. Kieran's attention turned to her, golden eyes finding hers across the distance that separated them. Relief, gratitude, and something deeper shone in his expression as he began moving toward her. His path was intercepted by Thorn, who approached with uncharacteristic humility, head slightly bowed. "Alpha," he acknowledged. "The compound is secure. We have 10 dead, 22 wounded. Redclaw lost 17, with similar numbers injured. See to the wounded first, both packs, then arrange burial rites at dawn." "Yes, Alpha." Thorn hesitated, then added more quietly, "I was wrong. About her." He glanced toward Lyra. "No pure-blooded Omega would have stood against an Alpha for their mate. She has earned her place." Kieran's expression softened slightly. "Yes, she has. Many times over." The acknowledgement, spoken within hearing of many pack members, sent a ripple through the gathering. Lyra felt Helena's arded as instructed. Kieran continued toward Lyra, his focus unwavering despite the activity swirling around them. He stopped before her, close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his golden eyes, the depth of emotion he usually kept carefully controlled. "You interfered in an Alpha challenge," he said, voice pitched for her ears alone. "I did," she acknowledged, refusing to lower her gaze despite tradition dictating she should. "You could have been killed. So could you." A smile touched his bloodied lips. "You called me your mate, in front of both packs." Heat flushed her cheeks, but she didn't look away. "I did." "Did you mean it?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications that would affect not just them, but the entire newly expanded pack. A half-blood Omega as Luna was unprecedented, a challenge to traditions as old as werewolf society itself. "Yes," she answered simply. "I meant it." Helena discreetly withdrew her supporting arm, backing away to give them privacy, despite the public setting. Around them, the compound continued its transformation from battlefield to healing ground, wolves from both former packs working together under necessity's guidance. Kieran reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "You stood between me and death, faced an Alpha without shifting, armed with nothing but a silver dagger and courage." "I couldn't watch you die," she whispered. "No one has ever fought for me like that. Not for the Alpha, not for the pack, but for me." Before she could respond, he closed the distance between them, his lips finding hers in a kiss that cared nothing for tradition or audience. His arms encircled her carefully, mindful of her wounded back, yet holding her as if she were the most precious thing in his world. The kiss spoke what words could not: acceptance, need, belonging, a claiming more profound than any ceremonial marking could achieve. When they finally parted, Lyra found herself trembling, overwhelmed by the intensity of connection. "I'm not pure," she whispered, needing to say it one final time, needing to be certain he understood what claiming her as Luna would mean. Kieran's smile deepened, his forehead touching hers as he repeated the words that had changed everything between them. "Good. I don't need perfect. I need real." Chapter 8. Dawn broke over Blackwood territory, pale golden light illuminating the aftermath of battle. The compound, damaged but not destroyed, buzzed with activity as wolves from both former packs worked to restore order. Wounded were treated in the communal hall, dead from both sides laid respectfully in the clearing for burial rites, and hunting parties dispatched to feed the hungry. Lyra stood on the porch of the Alpha's cabin, watching as Kieran moved among his expanded pack, checking on wounded, offering encouragement, resolving conflicts between former enemies with firm but fair decisions. Despite his own injuries, now bandaged by Marta's skilled hands, he had refused to rest until certain the immediate crisis had passed. "He's a good Alpha," Helena observed, joining Lyra on the porch. The councilwoman had helped lead the refugees back from the trapper's cabin at first light, relief palpable when she discovered her daughter Maya had survived the battle. "The best," Lyra agreed softly. "And you'll make a good Luna." Helena's statement held no doubt, no reservation,
a dramatic change from the wary neutrality she had shown just days ago. "Not everyone shares your confidence," Lyra noted, nodding toward a group of Redclaw females who watched her with undisguised disdain from across the compound. Sarah stood among them, the defeated Alpha's daughter, making no effort to hide her disdain. "They'll learn," Helena replied, "as we all have." She touched Lyra's arm briefly. "I should help with the wounded. Marta needs all the assistance she can get." As Helena departed, Lyra continued her observation of the newly formed pack. The integration would not be smooth. Too much blood had been spilled, too many grievances nursed over generations. Yet watching wolves who had been trying to kill each other hours ago, now working side by side, gave her cautious hope. Thorne approached Kieran near the communal hall, the two conferring briefly, before the Alpha nodded and began moving purposefully toward his cabin, toward her. His expression was serious as he climbed the porch steps, fatigue evident in the lines of his face. "The tunnels are fully cleared," he reported without preamble. Relief washed through her. "Good. What about the traitor? Any idea who gave Redclaw information about the evacuation routes?" His expression darkened. "Not yet, but we will find them." The unresolved threat hung between them. Someone within their inner circle had betrayed them, had nearly caused the deaths of their most vulnerable pack members. That person remained among them, identity still hidden. "How are you feeling?" Kieran asked, concern replacing strategic focus as his eyes moved over her. "Marta said your wounds reopened during the fight." "I'll heal," she assured him. "Faster now that I don't have to hide my nature from the pack." A smile touched his lips. "No more hiding," he agreed, "for either of us." He led her inside the cabin, closing the door on the activity outside. The interior felt like a sanctuary after the chaos of the past 24 hours. Quiet, familiar, the sense of them both now intermingled in the space. "The burial ceremony will begin at noon," he said, moving to the small kitchen area to put on water for tea, a surprisingly domestic gesture from an Alpha who had just won a territory war. "Both packs together, honoring all fallen. It's important for integration." "And after?" Lyra asked, settling carefully into a chair to avoid pressing against her bandaged back. "After we begin rebuilding, physically and otherwise." He turned to face her, leaning against the counter. "The council will need restructuring to include Redclaw representatives. Hunting territories must be redefined, training programs integrated." "And us?" The question slipped out before she could reconsider it. Kieran's expression softened. "Us," he repeated, the single word somehow weighted with meaning. "That depends on you." "On me?" He approached, crouching before her chair so their eyes were level. "I meant what I said last night, what I have said from the beginning. I want you as my Luna, Lyra Kane, not just for political reasons, not just because you've proven yourself a dozen times over, but because you see me. Not the Alpha, not the position, but me." The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep inside her, the part that had been lonely for so long, the part that had never believed acceptance was possible. "There will be resistance," she warned. "Not everyone will accept a half-human Luna." "Let them resist," he replied simply. "They'll learn or they'll leave. Blackwood, the new Blackwood, will be built on worth, not bloodlines." "You make it sound so simple." "It isn't simple," he acknowledged, "but it is necessary. What happened with Redclaw is happening across werewolf society. Packs that cling to outdated traditions are dying. Those that adapt will survive." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "I need someone beside me who understands both worlds, who can help build something new from the ashes of the old. I need you, Lyra." The words echoed what he'd said days ago in this same cabin when everything had begun to change, yet now they carried new weight, backed by battle and blood, by choices made in the crucible of crisis. "When would this happen?" she asked, practical concerns surfacing through the emotional tide. "Traditionally, at the next full moon, but traditions seem less important than they once did." His thumb traced patterns across her palm. "The pack needs stability now, needs to see its leadership united and certain." "Tonight, then," she decided, surprised by her own boldness. "We honor the dead, then give the living something to believe in."
Approval warmed his eyes. Tonight, he agreed, leaning forward to seal the decision with a gentle kiss. The water began to boil, drawing him reluctantly back to the kitchen. As he prepared their tea, Lyra found herself contemplating the unlikely path that had led them here, from outcast Omega to Alpha's mate in the span of days, all because she'd been caught skinning a rogue wolf in the rain-soaked dawn. Life could change so quickly, fortunes reversing with a single decision, a single moment of courage or despair. 6 years as an outcast had taught her to expect the worst, to hide her true nature, to survive by remaining invisible. Now she was about to become the most visible female in a newly expanded pack. The irony wasn't lost on her. "What are you thinking?" Kieran asked, returning with 2 steaming mugs. "That nothing is certain. That everything can change in an instant." He handed her a mug, then settled into the chair opposite. "Frightening concept?" "Liberating," she corrected after a thoughtful sip. "If nothing is certain, nothing is permanent. Not status, not prejudice, not isolation. Nor connection, nor peace," he pointed out. "Those we fight for, we make them as permanent as possible through choice and commitment." He studied her over the rim of his mug, with something like wonder in his expression. How did no one see your worth all these years? They saw only what they expected to see, an unpure Omega, useful for menial tasks and eventually breeding, nothing more. The assessment was matter of fact, without self-pity. It's easier to accept the label you're given than to fight it constantly. "Until someone sees beyond the label," he suggested. "Until someone needs what only you can provide," she countered. "You needed truth when others offered flattery, needed perspective from outside tradition's boundaries. I happen to have those things. You happen to have much more than that. Courage, integrity, resilience, a heart strong enough to stand between an alpha wolf and his prey." Heat flushed her cheeks at the undisguised admiration in his voice. "I acted on instinct." "No," he shook his head. "You acted on love." The word hung between them, neither having used it before this moment. Lyra found herself speechless, unable to deny the truth, yet afraid to embrace it fully. "It's all right," he continued, reading her expression. "You don't need to say it back. Not yet. Actions have already spoken what words haven't." Relief and gratitude washed through her. Even now he was giving her space, acknowledging her need for caution after years of learned wariness. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Kieran's expression shifted back to alpha mode as he called, "Enter." Thorne stepped in, his usual stern demeanor tempered with what might have been respect as his gaze briefly met Lyra's before returning to his alpha. "The burial preparations are complete, and there's something you should both see." The hesitation in Thorne's voice, so uncharacteristic for the typically decisive beta, immediately put Lyra on alert. Kieran must have felt it too, setting down his mug as he rose. "What is it?" "We found something while clearing the council hall for the wounded. Something that explains how Redclaw knew about the tunnels." Thorne's jaw tightened. "It would be better if you saw for yourselves." Exchanging concerned glances, they followed Thorne from the cabin, across the compound to the council hall. The building's main chamber had been transformed into an infirmary, wounded from both packs resting on makeshift pallets, while Marta and her assistants moved among them. Thorne led them past this scene to a smaller antechamber used for storing pack records. Inside, several fighters stood guard around a figure seated on a chair. Already an Omega, an even more complex picture began to form. The information about the tunnels was private knowledge shared only with the beta, Doxin and Thorne. "This is Wren," Thorne introduced. "Former Redclaw, now Blackwood by your decree. He has information about the traitor." The young wolf, barely out of adolescence, looked up fearfully as Clearan approached. "Alpha," he acknowledged, lowering his gaze appropriately. "Speak freely," Kieran instructed. "No harm will come to you for truth." Wren swallowed hard, then began his story. "I was assigned to communications duty during the attack planning, responsible for receiving and transmitting messages between our advanced scouts and Alpha Vane. 3 days ago, I received a message from within Blackwood, information about pack defenses, patrol schedules, and..." He hesitated. "The existence and location of the emergency tunnels." "Who sent this information?" Kieran asked, voice dangerously quiet. Ren shook his head. I never met them directly. The messages came through a dead drop at the southern border, but they were signed. With what? Lyra prompted when he hesitated again. With this. Ren gestured to a small object on the table beside him, a silver pen in the shape of a crescent moon. It was attached to the final message about the kernel evacuation. Kieran lifted the pen, examining it with growing tension in his posture. Lyra moved closer, trying to understand the significance. What is it? She asked. A counselor's pin, he answered, voice tight with controlled anger. Specifically, the pin given to each elected member upon taking their seat. This one belongs to Elias. The name struck Lyra like a physical blow. Elias, one of the eldest council members, a respected voice for tradition, a wolf who had served Blackwood for decades. Why? She whispered. Why would he betray the pack? Let's ask him, Karen replied grimly, pocketing the pin. They found Elias in his cabin, packing a small bag with obvious haste. He froze when they entered, his weathered face composing quickly into a mask of dignified inquiry. Alpha, he greeted, setting down the shirt he'd been folding. I was just preparing a few things for the funeral rites. In a travel bag? Kieran asked mildly, though his posture radiated dangerous energy. Elias's expression faltered briefly before he recovered. I thought I might visit the northern outpost afterward, check on conditions there after all the unpleasantness. The northern outpost that's now within what used to be Red Claw territory. Kieran moved further into the room, effectively blocking the only exit. An interesting choice. Understanding dawned on the older wolf's face as he realized they knew. His demeanor changed instantly, the respected counselor falling away to reveal something harder, colder. How did you find out? He asked, not bothering to deny the implicit accusation. You signed your betrayal, Kieran replied, withdrawing the silver pin from his pocket. Careless for someone usually so meticulous. Ah. Elias actually smiled, though the expression held no warmth. Pride. Always my weakness, according to my late mate. Why? Lyra asked, the question burning inside her. Why betray your own pack? The elder's gaze shifted to her, disdain evident. My own pack died the moment Kieran Gray decided to pollute our bloodlines by elevating a half-breed to Luna. This territory has belonged to pure wolves for 12 generations. I would not stand by and watch it descend into mongrelization. The slur struck like a slap, but Lyra refused to show any reaction. So you collaborated with Redclaw, helped them attack your home, endangered children? I made an arrangement. Vane agreed to spare those of pure blood who were willing to accept Redclaw leadership. The tunnels were never supposed to collapse, merely be blocked to prevent escape, forcing surrender. You risked everyone's lives based on the promise of a rival alpha, including your own grandchildren. Kieran's voice had dropped to a dangerous register. Vane Blackthorn has absorbed 4 territories in 2 years through bloodshed and treachery, yet you trusted him with the lives of your pack. Former pack, Elias corrected, lifting his chin defiantly. I renounced Blackwood the moment you chose her. His gaze flicked dismissively toward Lyra. Tradition exists for a reason. Purity matters. Bloodlines matter. What you're doing will destroy everything our ancestors built. What I'm building will ensure our descendants survive. While wolves like you cling to outdated prejudices, the world changes around us. Adapt or die, the oldest law of nature. The 2 wolves stared at each other, generations of differing beliefs crystallized in their opposition. Finally, Kieran spoke again, voice carrying the unmistakable authority of Alpha Command. Elias Thornwood, you are charged with treason against Blackwood Pack. Your actions resulted in the deaths of pack members, endangerment of the vulnerable, and alliance with enemies. By pack law, the punishment is exile or death. The elder straightened, facing his judgment with the dignity of his position, if not the honor. Then kill me and be done with it. I will not crawl away in shame for defending the purity of our kind. Death would make you a martyr to others who share your views, and exile merely transfers the problem elsewhere. He paused, considering. There is a third option, traditionally reserved for the most serious crimes against pack hierarchy. Elias paled, immediately understanding. You wouldn't dare. Severance, Kieran stated flatly. Complete removal from pack bonds and protection. You remain on Blackwood territory, but as an Omega, the lowest rank, with no rights except those granted by Alpha Mercy. No wolf may accept your authority or follow your guidance, on penalty of sharing your fate. The punishment was ancient, rarely used in modern pack society. A living death for a wolf who had held high rank. Elias would remain physically among them, but spiritually isolated, severed from the pack bonds that gave werewolf existence meaning. You can't do this, Elias protested, genuine fear entering his voice for the first time. The council must vote on such a sentence. The council serves at my pleasure, Kieran reminded him, and betrayal of this magnitude falls under Alpha jurisdiction alone. He turned to Thorn, who had been silently observing from the doorway. Prepare the severance ritual for after the burial ceremony. Full pack attendance is mandatory. Yes, Alpha, Thorn acknowledged, satisfaction evident in his tone. He had never particularly liked Elias, Lyra recalled, had often clashed with the Elder over council decisions. You've killed me anyway, Elias said bitterly, as Thorn stepped forward to take him into custody. Just more slowly and cruelly than a clean death. No, Kieran corrected. I've given you the opportunity to experience what you've inflicted on others, to live as the lowest rank, judged not by your bloodline but by your actions alone. His gaze flicked briefly toward Lyra. Perhaps you'll learn something from the experience. As Thorn led the disgraced counselor away, Lyra remained silent, processing the revelations. Elias had betrayed them not for power or personal gain, but from genuine belief that her elevation threatened pack purity. How many others shared his views, but lacked the conviction or opportunity to act on them? Are you all right? Kieran asked when they were alone, concern replacing the hard authority he'd shown moments before. I'm fine, she assured him, though the confrontation had left her shaken. Just processing.
He nodded, understanding. There will be others who think like Elias, though hopefully none willing to go as far as treason. I know. She'd lived with prejudice her entire life. The revelation of its depth wasn't shocking, merely disappointing. Does it make you reconsider being Luna? The question held no pressure, only genuine concern for her well-being. Lyra thought about it seriously, weighing the challenges against the possibilities. Finally, she shook her head. No, if anything, it makes me more certain. The pack needs to see that different doesn't mean lesser, that strength comes in many forms. Pride and something deeper shone in Kieran's eyes as he reached for her hand. Then let's show them, he said simply, starting today. Hand in hand, they walked from Elias's cabin into the compound, where preparations for both burial and rebirth continued under the cleansing light of day. The burial ceremony began precisely at noon, when the sun stood highest in the clear autumn sky. The entire pack, both former Blackwood and Red Claw members, gathered in the large meadow beyond the compound, forming a circle around the carefully arranged bodies of the fallen. 27 wolves had died in total, 10 Blackwood, 17 Red Claw. Each had been washed, dressed in clean clothing, and positioned facing east toward the rising sun, in accordance with wolf tradition. Beside each body stood their closest family member, holding a torch not yet lit. Lyra stood at Kieran's side, wearing a simple blue dress borrowed from Helena, her first time in traditional formal wear since her family's fall from grace 6 years earlier. Around her neck hung a silver pendant Kieran had given her that morning, a crescent moon encircling a small wolf, the traditional symbol of the lunar position. The significance of her placement at the Alpha's right hand
clearly marked as his chosen mate, was not lost on the assembled pack. Whispers had followed them since they'd emerged from Elias's cabin together, growing into a steady murmur as formal preparations for both funeral and claiming ceremony became evident. Now, as they took their positions at the head of the circle, those whispers fell silent. Even those who might object to her elevation recognized the solemnity of the moment, the respect due to the dead regardless of former pack allegiance. Kieran stepped forward, raising his arms in the ancient gesture of summoning. His voice carried clearly across the meadow as he began the traditional words. "We gather to honor those who have journeyed beyond the veil, wolves of courage, wolves of strength, wolves of our united pack. Their bodies return to the earth, their spirits to the great hunt beyond the stars." He moved to the center of the circle, where a small fire pit had been prepared. Each life is a flame, bright, warm, essential. Each death diminishes our light, yet reminds us to burn more brightly while we can. From the fire pit, he took a single torch, touching it to the prepared kindling until it caught. This first flame, by tradition, represented the Alpha's connection to all pack members, living and dead. "I call upon the winds to carry their spirits home, upon the earth to receive their bodies, upon the fire to release their essence, upon the water to wash away our grief, leaving only proud memory." He approached the first family member, a young Red Claw female whose brother lay before her. With gentle dignity, he lit her torch from his own, then moved to each mourner in turn, sharing the flame that would soon release their loved ones to the next realm. When all torches burned, he returned to Lyra's side, his expression solemn yet somehow peaceful. This was the cycle of pack life, death and renewal, loss and continuation. As Alpha, he stood at the center of that cycle, responsible for guiding his wolves through its inevitable turns. "Now we release them," he announced, "not in anger or vengeance, but in honor and respect. Former divisions end here, former conflicts burn away. We are one pack now, united in life as these are united in death." At his signal, each family member stepped forward, touching their torch to their loved one's funeral pyre. Flames caught quickly on the oil-soaked wood beneath each body, rising in hungry tongues toward the clear sky. As smoke ascended from 27 pyres, Kieran began the morning howl, a deep, resonant sound that spoke of loss and remembrance, of honoring what had been while acknowledging it was gone. One by one others joined, until the meadow filled with the haunting chorus of werewolf grief. Lyra added her voice last, her howl higher, slightly different due to her mixed bloodlines. Yet rather than standing apart, it wove through the others, adding a counterpoint that somehow made the collective mourning more complex, more complete. They maintained the howl until the fires burned hot and bright, reducing physical forms to ash and memory. Then, gradually, silence returned to the meadow, broken only by the crackling of flames and occasional soft weeping from those most directly bereaved. "Remember them," Kieran said finally, "not as Blackwood or Redclaw, but as wolves who lived with courage and died with honor. Their sacrifice has forged our new beginning." With that, the formal ceremony concluded. Pack members began to disperse in small groups, some remaining to watch over particular pyres until they burned completely, others returning to the compound to prepare for the evening's second ceremony, the claiming of the new Luna. As they walked back toward the Alpha's cabin, Lyra felt a presence behind them. Turning, she found Sarah, Vane's daughter, following at a respectful distance. "Alpha," the Red Claw female called, "can I speak with you? And you're chosen." The careful avoidance of Lyra's new title was noticeable, but not overtly disrespectful. Kieran nodded, stopping to allow the younger wolf to approach. Sarah was striking in the daylight, tall and graceful, with the distinctive russet hair that marked Red Claw bloodlines. She would have made a politically advantageous mate for an alpha seeking to solidify control over a conquered pack. The irony of Kieran choosing Lyra instead was clearly not lost on her. "The ceremony was well conducted," she said formally. "My brother and I appreciate the respect shown to our fallen. All who died deserve honor. Former divisions no longer matter." She nodded, then turned her attention directly to Lyra, amber eyes assessing. "You stood between my father and your alpha, with nothing but a silver dagger and human form. Why?" The directness of the question was surprising, yet somehow refreshing after the whispers and sideline glances Lyra had endured all day. "Because it needed doing," she answered simply. "Most would say it needed courage beyond reason, or love beyond measure. Perhaps both," she acknowledged. The Red Claw female studied her a moment longer, then inclined her head slightly, not quite submission, but something approaching respect. "My father taught us that half-breeds were inherently weak, that their divided nature made them unreliable, their human blood a taint that diluted wolf strength."
"Many believe that," Lyra replied neutrally, aware of Kieran tensing beside her. "Many are fools," Sarah stated flatly. "I saw you fight, saw you face death without flinching. Whatever else flows in your veins, weakness is not part of it." She turned back to Kieran. "You chose better than tradition would dictate, Alpha. My brother and I will support your Luna when others question. We know strength when we see it." With that surprisingly decisive endorsement, she nodded once more, then continued toward the compound, leaving them momentarily speechless in her wake. "Well," Kieran said finally, "that was unexpected." "Former enemies sometimes make the strongest allies," Lyra observed, "especially when they've seen each other's true measure and battle. Wise words from my soon-to-be Luna." He took her hand, resuming their walk toward the cabin, a position you'll officially hold in just a few hours. The reminder sent a flutter of nervousness through her stomach. The Luna claiming ceremony would be witnessed by the entire pack, hundreds of wolves, many still adjusting to new leadership, some harboring doubts about her suitability. "Second thoughts?" Kieran asked, reading her expression with the uncanny perception he'd shown since their first encounter. "Not about you. Never about you. Just aware of the challenges ahead." His hand squeezed hers gently. "We face them together, as we faced everything else." The simple certainty in his voice steadied her, as it had so many times in the chaotic days since he'd found her skinning a rogue wolf in the rain. Whatever came next, integration challenges, prejudice, the weight of leadership, they would meet it side by side, Alpha and Luna, each bringing their unique strengths to balance the other's weaknesses. "Together," she agreed, the word both promise and comfort as they continued toward the future neither could fully predict, but both had chosen to share. Twilight softened the edges of the world as Lyra stood before the small mirror in Kieran's, now their bedroom. The claiming ceremony would begin at moonrise, less than an hour away, and despite her outward calm, anxiety fluttered beneath her ribs like a captive bird. She smoothed her hands over the simple white dress Helena had helped her find, not a traditional lunar claiming gown, with its elaborate embroidery and family symbols, but a clean, elegant shift that somehow felt more appropriate for a woman who had never fit traditional molds. Around her neck, the silver lunar pendant caught the last rays of sunlight streaming through the window. Her only other adornment was a thin silver circlet resting in her dark hair, another gift from Kieran, this one carrying the small crescent moon and wolf symbols that matched her pendant. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called, expecting Helena returning to help with final preparations. Instead, Marta appeared, the elderly pack doctor carrying a small wooden box. "Almost time," she observed, setting the box on the bedside table. "You look beautiful, child." "Thank you," Lyra replied, genuine warmth in her voice. Marta had been one of the few who had shown her consistent kindness over the years, treating her wounds without judgment when others might have left her to heal alone. "I've brought something for you," the older woman continued, opening the box to reveal a small silver flask. Traditional lunar blessing oil.
It's been in my keeping since there was last a proper Luna in Blackwood." Lyra's breath caught. Kieran's mother had died when he was barely adolescent, leaving the pack without a Luna for over 15 years. For Marta to have preserved the blessing oil all this time spoke of both devotion and hope. "I'm not sure I'm worthy of such an honor," she admitted softly. "Nonsense." Marta's tone brooked no argument. "You stood between death and our Alpha. You led our most vulnerable to safety through tunnels no one else remembered. You faced prejudice for years without becoming bitter or cruel." She lifted the flask, her weathered hands steady. "If anything, this oil is honored by touching your skin." Before Lyra could formulate a response, the door opened again. This time it was Helena and Maya, both dressed in formal pack ceremony attire. "It's nearly time," Helena announced, then paused, noticing Marta lit a silver flask. "Is that—" "Lunar blessing oil," Marta confirmed. "Preserved from the last Luna's time." Helena's eyes widened slightly, then softened with something like approval. "Perfect. Maya and I will help with the application if you'll allow it." The unexpected offer, a traditional honor usually performed by the new Luna's female relatives, brought a lump to Lyra's throat. With no family left, she had expected to prepare alone, or with only Marta's assistance. "I would be honored," she managed, emotion making her voice slightly rough. What followed was one of the most profound experiences of Lyra's life. The three women, representing different generations and positions within the pack, worked together to prepare her for the ceremony. Marta applied the sacred oil to her forehead, throat, and wrists, murmuring the ancient blessing words that had remained unchanged for centuries. Helena arranged her hair, weaving small white flowers through the dark strands alongside the silver circlet. And young Maya, who had shown so courage during the Red Claw attack, knelt to place the traditional silver anklet around Lyra's right leg, the symbol of a Luna's connection to pack territory. "My mother taught me that a true Luna walks between worlds, one foot in tradition, one in progress, one in authority, one in service." She looked up, admiration clear in her young face. "And I can't think of anyone who embodies that better than you." The simple statement, delivered with such conviction, dissolved the last of Lyra's doubts. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever resistance she might face, she would meet them as she had met every obstacle in her life, with quiet determination and the courage to be herself regardless of others' expectations. "It's time," Helena announced, glancing out the window where the first silver edge of the moon was becoming visible above the eastern trees. Together, the four women left the cabin, moving toward the sacred circle where the claiming ceremony would take place. The entire pack had gathered, forming concentric rings around the ancient stone altar at the center of the clearing. Torches burned at cardinal points, casting dancing light across hundreds of faces, some welcoming, some uncertain, some clearly disapproving. Kieran waited at the altar, magnificent in formal Alpha ceremonial attire, black pants and vest over a white shirt, with the silver chain of office around his neck. Beside him stood Thorn as witness, and on the opposite side, somewhat surprisingly, Vane, Blackthorn, the former Red Claw Alpha, leaning heavily on a staff, his still-healing leg clearly causing him pain.
As Lyra approached, a path opened through the gathered wolves. Silence fell across the clearing, all eyes fixed on the woman who would become their Luna, not through birthright or political arrangement, but through actions that had proven her worth beyond any traditional measure. She walked with quiet dignity, Helena and Marta flanking her as traditional attendants, Maya following a step behind as junior witness. The weight of ceremony and expectation pressed around her, yet somehow failed to touch her core. This moment belonged to her and Kieran, their choice, their commitment, their future. When she reached the altar, Kieran extended his hand. She placed hers in it, their fingers intertwining with the natural ease that had characterized their connection from the beginning.
Who comes before the pack to claim the position of Luna? Thorn asked, voice carrying the formal words across the silent clearing. I, Kieran Gray, Alpha of Blackwood, present Lyra Kane as my chosen mate and Luna, Kieran replied, his voice strong and certain. On what basis do you make this claim? Thorn continued. On the basis of courage proven in battle, wisdom shown in council, and loyalty demonstrated beyond question. Kieran's eyes never left Lyra's as he spoke. On the basis of love, freely given and returned. A murmur moved through the assembled wolves at the last words. The traditional formula usually ended with duties accepted and privileges granted, not this open acknowledgement of emotional connection. Yet another departure from convention, another step toward the new pack Kieran envisioned. Does any wolf of sufficient rank challenge this claim? Thorn asked, directing the question to the gathering. This was the moment Lyra had feared, the point where tradition allowed high-ranking pack members to object, to demand the Alpha reconsider for the good of the bloodline. For a tense heartbeat, silence held. Then, unexpectedly, Vane Blackthorn stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of his former position despite his current subordinate status. As former Alpha and current advisor to Blackwood, I speak not to challenge, but to support this claim. The declaration sent ripples through the assembly. Vane, traditional, proud, defeated, was the last wolf anyone expected to endorse a half-human Luna. I have faced Lyra Kane in battle, have witnessed her courage, her resourcefulness, her willingness to sacrifice for what she values. These qualities matter more than bloodline, more than tradition, more than the arbitrary distinctions we have used to separate worthy from unworthy. His gaze swept the gathering, lingering on those he sensed might harbour objections. A pack survives through strength, yes, but also through adaptation, through recognizing value wherever it appears, in whatever form it takes. He turned back to Kieran and Lyra, inclining his head in a gesture of respect that carried immense weight coming from a wolf of his stature. I offer my support and allegiance to Alpha Kieran Gray and Luna Lyra Kane, and I call upon all wolves of the united Blackwood pack to do the same. As his words broke a dam, other voices rose in support. Sarah and her brother from former Redclaw, Helena and Maya from traditional Blackwood, and gradually more and more until the clearing filled with affirmation. Not universal, some remained silent, some slipped away rather than pledge support, but enough, more than enough to confer legitimacy, to transform theoretical acceptance into practical reality. When the voices finally quieted, Kieran squeezed Lyra's hand gently, then turned back to Thorn to continue the ceremony. The claim is accepted by the pack, Thorn announced, satisfaction evident in his tone. Let the binding commence. What followed was both ancient ritual and deeply personal commitment. Kieran and Lyra exchanged the traditional vows, protection and support, loyalty and counsel, strength in unity, and compassion in leadership. Their hands were bound together with silver cord, symbolizing the unbreakable nature of the Alpha-Luna bond. Then came the marking, the moment that would irrevocably seal their union in pack law and werewolf society. Kieran shifted partially, enough for his canines to elongate into the sharp fangs of his wolf form, while maintaining his otherwise human appearance. It was a demonstration of exceptional control, possible only for the most powerful alphas. Lyra tilted her head, exposing the curve where neck met shoulder, the traditional location for a mate claim. His eyes met hers one final time, seeking absolute certainty. What she offered was not merely permission, but invitation, her entire being reaching toward this connection they had forged through crisis and courage. His teeth found her flesh with exquisite precision, sharp enough to break skin, but controlled enough to cause minimal pain. The sensation was unlike anything Lyra had experienced, a brief sting followed by spreading warmth that seemed to illuminate her from within. When he withdrew, the mark remained, 2 perfect punctures that would heal into permanent scars, visible proof of her status as Luna and Kieran's mate. By tradition, she should now mark him in return, though many alphas waived this part of the ceremony, considering it beneath their dignity to bear their Luna's mark. Kieran, predictably, broke with that tradition too. "Complete the bond," he instructed softly, tilting his own head to expose the same vulnerable area. Lyra hesitated, glancing at Thorn for confirmation that this departure from normal protocol was acceptable. The beta nodded, something like approval flickering in his usually stern expression. Unlike Kieran, Lyra needed to shift more fully to access her wolf's fangs. The transformation was still painful for her, still less fluid than for pure-blooded wolves, but she managed the partial shift with more grace than she'd ever achieved before, perhaps because of the strength flowing into her through the newly formed bond. Her fangs extended, she leaned forward to place her mark on Kieran's skin, completing the circle of their connection. As her teeth broke his flesh, she felt something new unfurl between them, a private link, tenuous but unmistakable, carrying impressions of his emotions directly to her consciousness. Pride, joy, fierce protective instinct, and beneath it all a bottomless well of love so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her senses. When she withdrew, shifting back to fully human form, tears streaked her cheeks, not from pain, but from the sheer intensity of what she had glimpsed within him. His fingers gently brushed the moisture away, his own eyes suspiciously bright in the torchlight. "It is done," Thorn announced to the assembled pack. "By ancient right and modern choice, by blood and by bond, Kieran Grey and Lyra Kane are Alpha and Luna of Blackwood. May their union bring strength to the pack and wisdom to their leadership." A cheer rose from the gathering, tentative at first, then gaining strength until it echoed through the night air. The silver cord binding their hands was carefully untied, preserved to be woven into the pack's ceremonial tapestry as record of this historic union.
As tradition dictated, Kieran led Lyra in a circuit of the clearing, acknowledging the pack's acceptance of their bonded status. Wolves bowed their heads as the couple passed, some deeply, some barely perceptibly, but each offering the respect due to Alpha and Luna. When they completed the circle, Kieran raised their joined hands, his voice carrying across the now quiet gathering. "Tonight we have forged new bonds, between mates, between former enemies, between tradition and progress. Tomorrow we begin building the future of Blackwood together." His gaze swept the assembled wolves, authority and certainty radiating from him. Some of you welcomed this union immediately, some hesitated, some may still harbour doubts. All reactions are understood, if not equally welcomed. His grip on Lyra's hand tightened slightly. But know this, the time for division has passed. Lyra Kane is Luna of Blackwood by my choice and by pack acceptance. She will be respected as such by every wolf who wishes to remain within our territory. The declaration hung in the night air, not a threat precisely, but a clear boundary drawn with Alpha authority. Any who could not accept Lyra would need to seek their future elsewhere. "Now," he continued, his tone lightening, "tradition calls for celebration. Let us honour both the old ways and the new beginning they have witnessed tonight." With that, the formal ceremony concluded, transitioning into the feast and festivities that would continue well into the night. Drums began to beat, awakening the primal rhythms that spoke to wolf and human alike. Food appeared from the communal kitchens, drink flowed freely, and gradually the solemn atmosphere gave way to genuine celebration. Lyra found herself at the centre of it all,
receiving congratulations from wolves who had barely acknowledged her existence days before. Some were clearly sincere, others politically motivated, but all recognized the new reality. She was Luna now, second only to Kieran in the pack hierarchy. "How does it feel?" Helena asked, appearing by her side with 2 glasses of the sweet wine traditionally served at pack celebrations. "Surreal," Lyra admitted, accepting the drink gratefully. "Like I might wake tomorrow and find myself back in my old cabin, still the outcast Omega everyone avoids." "That won't happen," Helena assured her, nodding toward where Kieran stood talking with Thorn and several other fighters. "He won't allow it. Neither will those of us who have seen what you truly are." "And what am I?" Lyra asked, genuinely curious about the councilwoman's perception. Helena considered for a moment. "A bridge," she said finally, "between wolf and human, tradition and innovation, strength and compassion. What our pack needs now, whether everyone realizes it yet or not." The description resonated with what Maya had said earlier about walking between worlds. Perhaps that was truly her value, not despite her mixed heritage, but because of it. The ability to see from multiple perspectives, to understand different viewpoints, to navigate the complex territory between seemingly opposing forces. As the celebration continued around them, Lyra's gaze returned to Kieran, finding him already watching her from across the clearing. Even without their newly formed bond, she would have read his intention in the intensity of his gaze, the barely restrained energy in his posture. It was time for the final, most private part of the claiming ceremony. He moved toward her with predatory grace, the crowd instinctively parting before their alpha. When he reached her, he extended his hand in silent invitation. She placed hers within it without hesitation, their fingers intertwining with the natural ease that had characterized their connection from the beginning. "Our people celebrate," he observed, voice pitched for her ears alone. "Shall we complete what we've begun?" Heat bloomed in her cheeks, but she met his gaze steadily. "Yes." No further words were needed. By tradition, the Alpha and New Luna would withdraw from festivities to complete their bonding in private, cementing their connection on all levels, emotional, spiritual, and physical. As they moved away from the celebration toward the Alpha's cabin, their cabin now, Lyra felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, tonight belonged to them alone, to the bond they had forged through crisis and courage, and to the future they would build together. The rain that had been threatening all evening finally began to fall as they reached the cabin door, gentle drops that quickly intensified into a steady shower. The sound created a cocoon of privacy around them, a natural barrier between their world and everything beyond. Inside, candles had been lit by thoughtful pack members, casting golden light across the simple space they would share. The transformation was subtle but significant, no longer merely the Alpha's private domain, but a home for both of them. Kieran closed the door behind them, then turned to face her, all pretense of formality falling away. In his eyes, Lyra saw not the Alpha, but the man, the one who had found her skinning a rogue wolf at dawn, who had recognized her worth when others saw only limitations, who had chosen her not despite her differences, but because of them. "I'm not pure," she whispered, repeating the words she'd said to him that first night, needing to hear his response one more time. His smile deepened as he drew her into his arms, his forehead touching hers as he completed what had become their private ritual. "Good. I don't need perfect. I need real." 6 months later, but most had embraced the transformation, recognizing that survival in a changing world required flexibility, that strength came in many forms, that diversity of perspective created resilience rather than weakness. Lyra paused, scenting the air carefully. The rogue's trail had grown stronger, fresher. She signaled to her trainees, watching with approval as they immediately adopted the defensive formation she'd taught them, alert but not aggressive, prepared but not threatening. "What do you smell?" she asked softly. "Male wolf, unmated, injured," replied Kira, the youngest of the group, her former Redclaw heritage evident in the russet highlights of her brown hair. "How injured?" Lyra prompted. Badly, answered Micah, a Blackwood wolf who had lost his father in the territory war. Blood scent is strong, movement pattern erratic. Not a threat, then, concluded Damon, the third trainee, whose analytical mind made him a natural strategist. More likely a refugee. Lyra nodded, pleased with their assessment. Exactly, which means our approach changes from defense to potential aid. Remember the first principle of Blackwood Border Patrol. Strength without unnecessary cruelty, they recited in unison, the new code Kieran had established for their expanded territory. Good. Now... She broke off as the wind shifted, bringing a new scent that made her instantly alert. Back, she commanded, voice low but intense. Defensive positions, now. The trainees obeyed instantly, responding to the authority in her tone without question. They moved into the formation they'd practiced dozens of times, a triangular arrangement that protected each other's flanks while maintaining clear lines of sight. From the dense undergrowth ahead emerged not the lone injured wolf they'd been tracking, but 5 unfamiliar wolves in human form. Their posture was aggressive, their sense marking them as members of the Stone Ridge Pack, traditionalists who had made their disdain for Blackwood's new leadership well known. "Well, what have we here?" drawled the apparent leader, a tall wolf with cold eyes and the bearing of an enforcer. The half-breed Luna and her little training pack? She maintained her calm, assessing the situation rapidly. 5 against 4, with her trainees inexperienced in actual combat. The odds weren't good, but retreat would signal weakness they couldn't afford to show at their borders. "You're on Blackwood territory," she stated clearly. "State your business, or leave." The leader's eyebrows rose mockingly. "It speaks with authority. How unusual." He made a show of looking around. "No Alpha to protect you today? How unfortunate." "The Luna needs no protection within our territory," Damon replied sharply, stepping forward before Lyra could respond. "And you need permission to be here." "Permission? From a half-human?" He spat on the ground. "Stone Ridge recognizes no authority tainted by human blood." Lyra placed a restraining hand on Damon's arm, feeling the tension vibrating through him. "Then Stone Ridge has no business on our lands," she replied evenly. "Leave now, and we'll overlook this incursion." "We're not here for territory," the leader replied, his tone hardening. "We're here for the principle. Werewolf leadership should remain pure. Your elevation sets a dangerous precedent that many packs find concerning." Understanding dawned with chilling clarity. This wasn't a random encounter. It was a planned confrontation, possibly an assassination attempt disguised as a territory dispute. The injured rogue had likely been bait to draw a patrol to this isolated section of the boundary. "You know who I am," she said, stepping forward rather than back, surprising the Stone Ridge wolves enough that they hesitated. "You know what I did during the territory war, how I stood between your ally Vane Blackthorn and my mate." The leader's expression flickered with uncertainty at her unexpected advance. Vane was a fool, weakened by age and ambition. Vane was Alpha of Red Claw for 20 years, defeated 4 rival packs before facing Blackwood, yet he submitted to Kieran Grey after I intervened in their challenge. Her hand moved to the silver pendant at her throat, the lunar symbol that marked her rank. "Do you know why?" Despite himself, the leader seemed caught by her question. "Why?" "Because he recognized that true strength isn't about bloodlines. It's about courage, adaptability, a willingness to evolve while honoring what matters in tradition." She took another step forward, now standing directly before the leader, despite being several inches shorter and considerably lighter. "Stone Ridge clings to outdated prejudices while the world changes around you. How many territories have you lost in the past decade? How many young wolves have left to join more progressive packs?" The question struck a nerve. She could see it in the leader's expression, in the uncomfortable shifts of his companions. Stone Ridge had indeed been declining, their rigid hierarchy and refusal to adapt making them increasingly irrelevant in modern werewolf society. "You know nothing of our pack," he growled, but the conviction had weakened in his voice. I know that attacking a neighboring Luna on her own territory would violate every code of pack conduct still honored by legitimate alphas. I know that such an act would unite not just Blackwood against you, but every pack that still respects the ancient laws of leadership and succession. As she spoke, she felt something stir within her, the pack bond that connected her to Kieran, to every wolf under their protection. She had never attempted to use it in this way before, had never been certain her half-human nature would allow the deeper aspects of pack magic to function through her. But in this moment of necessity, of protective instinct for her young charges, the connection flared to life. She sent a pulse of warning through it, not words, but pure intention, alerting Kieran and any wolves sensitive to the bond that danger threatened at the western border. The Stone Ridge leader must have sensed something changing, though he couldn't have known exactly what. His expression shifted from contemptuous to wary. "This isn't over," he stated, beginning to back away. "The pure packs will not stand by while mixed bloods rise to power."
"The strong packs will adapt and thrive," Lyra corrected. "The rest will fade into history. The choice is yours." For a tense moment, it seemed the Stone Ridge wolves might attack anyway, pride overriding tactical sense. Then, from the forest behind Lyra, came the sound that decided the confrontation, a howl deep and authoritative, unmistakably Kieran's. The Alpha had received her warning, and he was coming. The Stone Ridge leader's expression hardened with frustrated rage, but even he wasn't fool enough to challenge a neighboring Alpha within his own territory. "Fall back," he ordered his companions. "This isn't the right time." "There will never be a right time for what you planned," Lyra told him quietly. "Remember that when you return to your Alpha with empty hands." With final glares of impotent hostility, the Stone Ridge wolves retreated, disappearing into the undergrowth as swiftly as they had appeared. Lyra maintained her vigilant posture until she was certain they were truly gone, then turned to her trainees, who stared at her with expressions ranging from awe to disbelief. "You faced down 5 adult wolves without shifting, without weapons." "I had weapons," Lyra corrected gently. "Knowledge, certainty, and the strongest weapon of all, connection to my pack." She touched the lunar pendant again. "Never underestimate the power of bonds freely chosen and loyally maintained." Before the young wolves could respond, Kieran burst into the clearing in wolf form, massive and alert, flanked by Thorn and 2 other high-ranking fighters. He shifted immediately upon seeing them safe, concern evident in his expression as he strode toward Lyra. "Stone Ridge," she explained before he could ask. 5 wolves, likely sent to test our borders or worse. They've retreated for now." Kieran's expression darkened. "We suspected they might try something after their Alpha refused our Integration Summit invitation." His gaze moved to the trainees, assessing them for injuries or trauma. "Everyone unharmed?" "We're fine, Alpha," Micah assured him. "The Luna, she was incredible. She didn't even need to shift to make them back down." Pride warmed Kieran's eyes as they returned to Lyra. "I'm not surprised. Our Luna has always had more strength than those who judge by appearance can recognize." The simple statement, delivered with absolute conviction, warmed Lyra more deeply than any formal praise could have. 6 months into their partnership, Kieran's belief in her had never wavered, his respect for her abilities growing as she found new ways to serve the pack they were building together. "Thorn, escort the trainees back to the compound. Lyra and I will check the rest of the western border to ensure there are no other Stone Ridge wolves lurking about." As the others departed, Kieran pulled Lyra into a brief but fierce embrace. "I felt your call," he murmured against her hair. "Through the bond, it's getting stronger." "I wasn't sure it would work. I've never tried to use it that way before." "The Luna bond responds to need, to protective instinct. It recognized you as true Luna long before some members of our pack did." She smiled at that. "Most have come around now. Even Elias has stopped glaring quite so intensely when I pass his cabin." The mention of the disgraced counsellor, still living under severance punishment at the edge of the compound, brought a momentary shadow to Kieran's expression. Some perspectives change more slowly than others. "But they do change," she reminded him. "Look how far we've come in 6 months. Former enemies patrolling together, sharing meals, even forming new friendships. The integration is working, Kieran." "Because of you," he said softly.
your ability to see beyond old divisions, to find common ground where others see only differences. The pack needed exactly what you bring, perspective that bridges worlds. The compliment touched her deeply, recognizing as it did, the very quality that had once marked her as outsider, now valued as essential strength. "We should finish the border check," she said, reluctantly practical. "If Stone Ridge sent one group, there might be others." Kieran nodded, then surprised her with a swift, intense kiss. "Lead the way, Luna." Together they shifted, his transformation fluid and swift, hers still somewhat slower but increasingly painless with practice. The black wolf and the smaller silver grey moved in perfect tandem through the forest, their bond allowing communication more efficient than words as they patrolled their territory. As they ran, Lyra reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From outcast Omega to respected Luna, from solitary survivor to essential half of a powerful partnership. The path had neither been straight nor easy, marked with blood and battle, prejudice and pain. Yet it had led to this moment, running free beside her mate, valued for exactly who and what she was, helping to build a pack strong enough to face whatever challenges the future might bring. She was not pure, not perfect, not what tradition would have chosen. She was real, and that had made all the difference. When the soft rain began to fall, droplets sliding through her fur to cool her skin, she welcomed it as an old friend. The rain that had witnessed her skinning a rogue wolf at dawn 6 months ago, that had masked her scent from enemies during battle, that had drummed against the windows during her first night as Kieran's mate. The rain that now blessed the territory they protected together, washing away old boundaries as surely as it nourished new growth. Alpha and Luna, Black Wolf and Silver, tradition and innovation, together they ran through their changing world, proving with every stride that differences united could create something stronger than uniformity had ever achieved. And above them, filtering through the raindrops, the sun broke through the morning clouds, illuminating their path forward into the future they were creating, step by step, choice by choice, together. Like the rain that falls across all boundaries without discrimination, we witness how imperfection creates the most beautiful patterns. Like Lyra, we all carry scars that shape us, differences that define us. If her journey through rejection to acceptance touched something in your own heart tonight, subscribe to Romantasy Stories and share which moment resonated most deeply with you. Until our next journey beneath stormy skies and silver moons, remember that in our authenticity, not our perfection, we find our greatest strength.